Turtles all the way down. I'm Jake, sometimes Jenk. It's going to be another short introduction here today. I've got a few in the can I want to get out, so better to get these out with some short introductions rather than going into a detailed monologue like I'm apt to do on occasion. And I will have several of those coming up as well. I've got a lot of ideas. The problem is sometimes I have too many ideas. It's just hard to, narrow it down and get it into a quick 15-minute monologue. But those will be coming soon, maybe separately as separate episodes. In this episode, we have Angus Rowe McPherson comes back for a second conversation to the junction. And like the last time, we had a very long, more than 2.5 hours, breezy conversation. We went through very quickly without, I don't think we even took a break. Really fun guy to talk to, very wide-ranging subject matters. I mean, if you just look at the hashtag words that are associated with this podcast, you've got things like AI, robotics, psychedelics, IQ, brains, culture, philosophy, science, Dunbar number, primates, knowledge, scale, culture, academia, blockchain, politics, networks, information, yada, 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 on and on and on. So lots, we covered a lot and had a great time talking with Angus. I hope you enjoy it. Talk soon. Angus is back. Hey, Angus.
Hi there.
Thank you for inviting me to your robotics and AI conference, but I think I got the message about a week too late.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
No, I'm not on social media very much these days. Yeah, and I don't have any of my notifications set. So when somebody sends me a message on Twitter, I probably won't see it unless I happen to be looking at it at that time.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've been probably calmer and less stressed since I've been avoiding social media, Facebook in particular.
Are you completely off Facebook?
I don't have it on my phone.
Yeah.
And about once a month, I'll log in on my laptop and have a look. Or if there's an event going on, that sort of thing.
I basically shut mine down.
Yeah.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
There's apparently that Jaron Lanier person.
What's that?
He's a technology guru character who was one of the early pioneers of VR. At any rate, I've heard him on a couple of podcasts recently because he's been shopping around a book that is titled something along the lines of delete all of your social media accounts now. And he basically argues that we should just completely get off of it.
Well, I mean, that's probably good advice. But I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I get off of it and then I miss messages, of social gatherings and, events, things that I want to go to here and there. But of the 9 or 10 that you miss, maybe one of them is worth going to anyway, or less. Yeah.
And I mean, the social network that works best for me is email, right? Like just send an email and that it's universal. I can get it on all my devices. It's easy to deal with rather than like these fragmented, like multiple messaging things. So we were messaging through Twitter.
Yeah. That's weird. And
I don't know why I don't have your email address, but I guess I don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I find I dislike having to like check my Facebook Messenger, my Twitter Messenger, my Slack, my this and that, and this. Just let's pick one.
Yeah,
go with it.
Well, I mean, in our case, I think I happened to see something that you posted on Twitter, and I thought, oh, Angus, I wanted to contact you about coming back in here, and so I thought, well, I'm on Twitter already, so I'll just message it that way. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's their plan. Yeah. How to keep you inside the one app, but it doesn't mean that it's easier for any of us to actually.
No.
Like if the real functionality is one-to-one messaging, you have a good way to do that.
Right. And that's email.
Yeah. To my mind.
That's true. But as I understand it, only the kids aren't using email.
Yeah, whatever. Like I'm 40 this year. I'm comfortable being an old email user, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, like I mean, I guess I don't believe that there's anybody who doesn't have an email address, actually.
I think you're right.
I think they all do. Yeah. Like everybody has a Gmail account or something.
Mm-hmm. But when I had, I used to when you have a Gmail on your iPhone, you've got the little number beside the indicator.
Yeah.
Anytime there was a number attached to that, I would go in and at least, even if I wasn't going to read it, I'd click on it so that that number would disappear.
Yep.
I stopped doing that as well last year. So I have, like hundreds of emails that I haven't even gotten to. And it hasn't been a problem.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. You hear about people declaring email bankruptcy and just saying, like, whatever. It's
start fresh. Get rid of it.
Whatever I have not replied to as of right now, I'm deleting, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That seems liberating.
It does. Yeah.
I mean, I do feel anxious when I'll periodically catch a glimpse of people's phones and they'll say like 17,000 unread messages. Right. And that makes me anxious.
That's right. Well, it used to make me anxious. Yeah. This is what I'm saying.
But I just prefer to not see the little, don't have the weird little red dot.
Yeah, I'll just get rid of the indicator entirely.
I don't want to see that or no. And
and we know why that's there. I mean, that's obviously just to get you to feel anxious and to click on it.
Totally. Right. And
that's the whole point.
I think that's why it's red, because it's a highly visible color. And is it there to make you feel anxious or just to be a visible cue so that you make sure you don't miss things?
Right.
Like, whether it's helpful or anxiety inducing is kind of an open question, but.
Well, I mean, being the primates that we are and the social beings that we are, there is anxiety associated with missing out in social circumstances and environments. We want to be included and we want to be an important part of a group of people. And the greatest punishment we give to people is to put them in isolation, and in prisons and lock them up. And that's the worst thing you can do to somebody.
That's totally true.
Right? Because we start to freak out and act really weird when we're completely alone.
I mean... But there's the other end of the spectrum is just, like constant social interaction. And I'm sure that there are some people who thrive on that. And maybe we're like at a privileged place in time in history where we're allowed to be alone at times. I don't know if that's always been the case, that people have had the liberty to be alone. But I do think there's some value in it.
Oh, absolutely. But I spend a lot of time alone, and it's not always healthy.
Yeah.
You
can go there and be like, you can go down rabbit holes.
Well, lately, I don't know. I've been, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but there hasn't been a lot of episodes released lately in this past year. And I've been kind of going through an up and down, I don't want to say manic, depressive, bipolar type thing, but in my own particular a miniature version of that, it seems like that. I mean, in the winters, I tend to get pretty depressed. And then lately, the last couple of months, I got somewhat manic. And and that's equally problematic. When I'm depressed, I complain I'm not getting anything done, but I don't really care. I just don't want to do anything. I just want to sit around. And then when I get manic, I get very excited about shit, and I want to do everything, and I end up doing nothing because it just kind of gets overexcited. I get overexcited about stuff. I get a little, stay up late and thinking about things, and then I sleep in because I was up too late, and things don't get done that way either.
And so on both ends of the spectrum, you're not accomplished.
No, it's true.
I mean, there's something that feels so good about having lots of ideas. But again, it's easy to go down rabbit holes and pursue loose ends and start projects and never finish them. And then probably leads directly later to feeling hopeless and overwhelmed.
Yeah. It all feeds into Well, I kind of made I've been experimenting with psychedelics and mind-altering things. I experimented with something a couple of months ago that was somewhat unusual for me, and it was Adderall. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's kind of like the ADHD drug. but it's a stimulant essentially.
Yeah.
I think it's essentially 4 different stimulants put in together. And I'm not typically attracted to those sort of things,
Okay.
or I don't think there's much value in like cocaine, for example,
Yeah.
or cigarette nicotine, or even caffeine. Like I cut out caffeine about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Most of the caffeine in my life was cut out, and I felt a lot better. For example, that balance, that manic depressive type thing was somewhat controlled just by cutting out caffeine. That seemed to
Interesting.
And this past year or so or two, mainly because I've been having breakfast at the Purple Onion there, and they don't have decaf, so I've been drinking a little bit of caffeine in the morning, and lo and behold, I'm having these fluctuations again.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I would try Adderall just to see what it does to my, I tried it for a couple of weeks. I went off for a week and get the dosages right. It seemed like it was working. I felt calmer. I felt like I was able to accomplish more. But strangely enough, I felt less, well, I guess it's not surprising, somewhat less emotionally attached. Mm-hmm. It took more to get me emotionally engaged, it seemed. Maybe I was even less affectionate until, you start maybe hugging my girlfriend and holding her hand. Then you start to feel it, but it doesn't come on spontaneously as much. And then eventually, after a couple of weeks, in the last time I was doing it, I started feeling really agitated and like manic and staying up late and thinking about, I nearly bought a $2 million property.
Yep.
And I was thinking about buying, a big car or something like that. Like, what the fuck am I doing? And and then when I stopped that, I found myself getting even more manic the week after.
Sorry, after you stopped.
After I stopped. About a week or two after, it just continued to get more and more manic.
I mean, the thing that's complicated about, and I've never used Adderall, I've never used Ritalin. I know a lot of kids who are
it seems
in
to be
the
very
90s everybody was on Ritalin. But the difference between being on Ritalin as a 10-year-old, where you're just vaguely being medicated, versus an adult, is that you probably have a much more nuanced picture of what it is that you're taking, and so that the placebo effects are maybe deeper, right? Like, how do you disentangle just the manic depressive cycles from your knowledge of what it is you're taking and what the impact is meant to be, and it's a really weird, complicated interaction there.
It is, and that's because the human being is a weird bizarre, complicated interaction, and a whole bunch of shit going on inside us. And when you mention placebo, I think that's probably half the value of most medicine. It seems,
totally.
At least, it's the setandsetting in a trip that we talk about, and a psychedelic trip, or if, any kind of a medication that you get, you're basically being put on a trip, and your setandsetting is your expectation, your placebo effect that comes into it, and that's going to have. It's not. I mean, for years I was kind of reluctant to even say or talk about placebo effect, lest it's affected. Like, I didn't want to talk about placebo effect with a friend who was taking medication because I didn't want them to think too much about it, and maybe it didn't work for them anymore. You know what I mean? But what I'm realizing is that even if you know it's a placebo, it still seems to work.
Well, that's a thing I do find when you talk about decaf coffee. There are cues that I get from the taste of coffee that induce some of the physiological responses to coffee. And I do find that if I drink too much decaf coffee, I feel like I'm over caffeinated.
Interesting. Yeah. But apparently it has about a tenth of the caffeine. Or
sure, but I never drink 50 cups of it. Right? But for whatever reason, it's the other cues associated with even though I know that it's not caffeinated, that it's can't be the caffeine, but my body seems to disagree.
Well, that makes so much sense in my conception of the self, because I talk at length about how, we're a bunch of these habituated patterns and cycles of movements within us. So if you're drinking coffee and you're getting caffeine, part of that cycle, it's, part of the, the impression of it, the look of it, the smell of it, plus the caffeine that's in your system and the behavioral effects it has on you, that happens so many times in a repetitive, cycles over and over again. When you remove one of those elements, like the caffeine, and continue most of that cycle, it's still triggering those neurons, those endorphins, you're still getting the same effect.
I mean, you wonder like which of the elements are the critical cues though? Because if you change the color of the coffee to blue, you respond pretty differently.
Yeah. Some are more important than others.
Yeah. But the caffeine is an imperceptible element, or mostly, I don't know if it has a bit of a residual flavor or something.
Yeah.
But, mostly imperceptible. And so your body has no reason to think that anything has changed.
Other than its association with those other patterns that it had.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and when I did quit caffeine or switch to decaf, I'd often get, and I still do sometimes, why would you drink decaf? That's crazy. Like, why drink coffee? And then I think, well, if you're drinking coffee just for the caffeine, why not just take a pill? I mean,
totally.
Like, I'm taking it for the taste of it, and the feel and maybe the warm feeling inside, etc. But when I want a drug, I take a drug. It's not.
Yeah, I mean,
it's more efficient ways to do that if that's the only reason you're drinking coffee.
Coffee, alcohol, and nicotine are they're all pretty powerful drugs.
Oh, they are. Yeah.
That have complicated social rituals associated with them, and we've sort of managed to break the back of smoking and nicotine mostly here, but I still know a bunch of people who have these like ingrained personal rituals or group social rituals and things that are associated with smoking cigarettes, and they are really hard to stop.
Yeah. Especially when they're associated with other patterns like social behaviors, going out and talking to friends after dinner, that sort of thing. Yeah. Once it's hooked into other patterns, it's really hard to get rid of because it's got its hooks in everything you do if you're smoking all the time.
Totally. Yeah. And I do wonder, and I'm curious to see as other substances are normalized and legalized and normalized and sort of integrated into like a socially acceptable behavior, how what the new rituals are going to be. And
well, it could be anything. That's human behavior. Like anything that we do, any activity that we do ties into pleasures and anxieties and fears, and then it becomes stronger.
Totally. Yeah. But I'm curious what is connoisseurship around marijuana going to look like? Like will having like vaping at the table ever be acceptable? Will there ever be like a on a dessert menu, like would you like cheese, coffee, or a vape?
I think so.
Are those things? Yeah. Like, and how is that going to emerge? And
I think we're kind of at the early stages of that, right? I mean, we have, in Toronto here, in my neighborhood, we have dispensaries, they're not legal, but there's a place down the street here.
They're pretty normalized, though, in a lot of ways.
It's so weird. I mean, at first you used to have to go in and maybe give some ID or get a doctor's note or something like that. The current ones, you just walk in. You don't even have to give ID. You don't have to do anything. You just buy what you want. And it's become normalized in that sense. But the edibles are not available anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because that's the reason they were being raided in the first place, mostly.
It's because of edibles.
Because they, for some reason, the authorities think that they're more dangerous. Maybe because kids could mistake them for
probably
candies.
Accurate.
Yeah, could be.
I mean, I do think having a chocolate bar in the house that like has a big no kids sign on it. Yeah, it's probably a tough thing to manage for most households.
That's true. But Tide Pods look like candy too. And
turns out that people want to eat them and be on the... Well, and that's... You're right. I mean, so does Advil, right? Advil tastes sweet.
Yeah. Like they have delicious. Those nice gel caps, like Dayquil or something,
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's it. We just need the behaviors associated with storing some of these things, if we are serious about kids not using them, is to, keep them in like kid restricted areas. But then we have alcohol in a liquor cabinet or whatever, and it's available to kids. Like if they really want to get into it. It's not under lock and key or anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. I can't remember what their position was. The public health. Somebody high up in the Toronto medical establishment apparently came out with a Globe and Mail article saying that advocating
I saw that.
to legalize or decriminalize all drugs, which they did in Portugal. They decriminalized all of them, and what they found is that drug abuse went down.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, like this is a bit of an aside, but you have arguments with people about gun violence along borders.
Yeah.
Right. And like, apparently there's in some border regions around the US-Mexico border, there's a lot of gun violence. And you're like, well, it's a phenomenon of the border.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon of the restriction of something, of flow of goods or people or whatever across that border that's concentrating the violence there.
Yes.
And, similarly with drug prohibition,
Yeah.
a lot of the pathologies are a phenomenon of the prohibition, not
Absolutely.
not anything fundamental to
and deeply related to our economic behaviors in general. It's just that humans will look for choke points and arbitrage opportunities, like where there's some restriction, they will find ways around restriction because it will be profitable to do so.
Yeah.
And so if you decriminalize drugs, it takes out, which is obvious, takes out organized crime's, profit motive in many cases.
So I'm going to be mangling this, but there were in the state of Oregon, I believe,
Portland,
when they were looking at or Washington. Sorry, I don't know which state.
Yeah.
We're going to call
both
it
up
one,
there somewhere.
Northwest.
Yeah, Northwest. Yeah.
Looking at decriminalizing or legalizing rather marijuana, and so they're going through this process and trying to figure out, okay, how is this going to work? And they realized that at commodity prices, that like just raw commodity marijuana sells for like 30 cents a pound or something. Like it's cheap, right?
Yeah,
it's a really trivial
agricultural price.
Yeah, like it's a trivially easy material, like plant to grow.
It's a weed.
It's a weed. It's easy to harvest. Like basically everything about it is easy. And so the gap between the like an unregulated market versus a completely criminal market is vast. And so, but they don't want to price it at the commodity price floor for a lot of the same reasons that they don't want it to be just universally accessible to everybody in whatever quantity they want. And that if it costs 30 cents a pound or whatever it is, there'll be too much access to children, ... And so then there's a question, like, where do you set the price? And wherever you set the price, there's still an arbitrage opportunity, right? As soon as you've set it above the commodity price, there's an arbitrage opportunity, and it's going to be profitable, and people are going to move in.
That's true.
And so their logic was that they needed to significantly increase enforcement spending at the same time that they were going through the legalization process. And the expectation was that they would do it in the short term until they could sort of extinguish the criminal behavior associated with it.
How did that turn out?
I don't know. And I don't even know which state it was. Right. It's mangled, but
no, but these are the kind of considerations that, and quite often we get those wrong, and there's unintended consequences for everything we do. It's like,
I mean, and they're complicated. Like there's a long story behind this, but I was a witness as a high school student to an assault and had to go to court to be a witness. And I don't know if you've ever been to, it was a superior court. They just grind through a docket of cases. And so we sat there, my friend and I, who were witnesses to this assault, sat there all day listening to various cases. And like maybe half of them were cigarette smuggling. This was in the mid-90s. It was in Kingston.
Kingston? Oh, right, because of the U.S. border being
nearby. And there's
nearby.
a U.S. border, and then the
native reserves.
There's some reserves, and there's sovereignty questions, and there's all kinds of stuff. And at that time, there were relatively extremely high tobacco taxes in Ontario and low taxes in New York, and
there's your arbitrage.
And there's your arbitrage, right? And
Yeah.
And people will take advantage of it.
You know, I was with a friend just a few days ago. We went to the corner store and she bought some cigarettes, and I had no idea that they're like, it was $16.50 or something for a pack of cigarettes. It blew my mind.
I was at a gas station the other day waiting to pay for gas, and somebody came and bought cigarettes weirdly on 2 different debit cards, which I guess they were buying for a friend or whatever. But and it was like $14 or $15.
Whoa.
Like, just that's an extremely expensive habit.
It is. I mean, like marijuana is way cheaper.
50 cents. Like, like do something else.
Well, I mean, at the height of my pot smoking, which is the last couple of years, I mean, I probably didn't spend more than $10. $10 a day might have been the most that I ever spent on
which is
on
like
weed.
kind of like
Like
it's
a
a
pack
2
a day.
latte habit. Yeah, it's funny to me to think, though, which of those, like when you rank order the social acceptableness of those various habits, I wonder, I'm curious where the $10 a day weed habit lands.
Yeah.
Because my response is that it's less socially acceptable than the 2 latte.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
But to me, more acceptable than the pack a day.
I would agree. Yeah.
Right? I don't know where alcohol lands.
That's my least favorite drug. Well, alcohol and stimulants.
Do you drink wine?
Occasionally, yeah. I like the occasional good wine if it's worth drinking.
See, my wife is a real wine drinker. It comes from like a wine business family, and so they're pretty into wine. I like it. Yeah,
but as an alterant, it's terrible.
Oh, it's kind of unpleasant. Yeah. I would really like wine that could be like, there's something about like a 1 glass of wine, like that level of
that's great.
Low grade.
That can be great.
Whatever. I don't know if it's a buzz, but like pre-buzz, I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
But sort of 2 or 3 glasses, I don't.
Yeah. And before I can even feel good, drunk, I get nauseous and, I don't, dizzy, and it just doesn't feel good physically, by the time you can enjoy yourself, you have to drink. It's kind of like edibles for me. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but because I was smoking a lot of weed, I wanted to switch to edibles because I don't think marijuana itself is harmful. It's the smoke for me that's bothers me. But edibles just do not work on me. I've taken 20 times a dose.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I've taken 1,300 milligrams of THC, which they say like 20 milligrams could get a lot of people, stoned. It just doesn't work on me.
And is it? It's not that it doesn't have an effect, or weird.
The time that I have, if I have 1,000 milligrams, I get a little bit of a buzz. I get a little bit, but then again, it's like alcohol. I start to feel nauseous and I might even vomit because I've eaten too much. So it just doesn't work. And I think it's the stomach enzymes or something like that that's doing it.
That's interesting. There was a New Yorker piece about a woman, I believe from Colorado, who had started kind of like a homespun artisanal baked goods, like marijuana baked goods business. And it was sort of a feel-good story about her, but a large part of what they were talking about was the ability with some of these edibles to precisely target dosing, and that people that like the dose response curve for people and edibles is like highly variable. And so there are some people who would take, 2 milligrams and they're fine. And so if they happen to eat a 20 milligram cookie, they're going to be fucking having a nightmare.
Oh yeah.
Right. Whereas
tripping all kinds of balls.
you need like 1,000 times more than that. Right. And
it's bizarre.
And so again, when you like, what is the future of like the social conventions associated with these things going to look like? So you go to a restaurant and they're like, oh, would you like chocolates? Would you like would you like weed infused chocolates? Whatever.
Right.
But subsequently, you rarely have a conversation with a sommelier about alcohol content. They might say like, this is
because the variance is so low.
It's pretty low.
Yeah.
But it may be that your weed sommelier will need to be like have to interrogate you a little bit about your tolerance level and your habituation and all this stuff.
Yeah, and I think it has something to do with enzymes, because I did an ayahuasca ritual, and with ayahuasca you have the vine itself, which if you were to just drink, it would not get you stoned because the enzymes just break it down. But what they do is the shamans mix it with another plant, which is really an enzyme inhibitor.
Oh.
Yeah, so when you drink them together, your enzyme inhibitor is keeping you from breaking it down, and then that's what gets the DMT working in your system for an hour instead of, a few seconds and it's gone. When you smoke DMT, it's only a few minutes because it gets right into your blood system and then it gets worked out quickly. Okay. If you eat it, it doesn't work at all unless you have the enzyme inhibitor.
That's interesting. Are they, do you know anything about the history, like the ethnobotany of how people figure that stuff out?
Well, the explanation I've gotten was that, it's thousands of years old that they've been doing it. And the explanation I got, the shamans just happen to know that when it comes to poisons, quite often they say that the antidote to the poison is often growing near it.
Okay.
So they know that if something is a poison, you could probably find something else nearby. So they figured out the locality of these things and just tried a few things. And in a way,
and I guess like the sample space is your forest, and there's generations of people to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think you would pay a lot of attention to the plants growing around you, because that's what's going to feed you, and that would be your survival. We don't notice what's growing around because we don't have to rely on.
I know. That is in terms like there's infinity gaps in my knowledge, but the one that I think about a lot when I was just in Algonquin Park, covered in black fly bites, which is gross, but it's gorgeous. But walking around, I'm like almost completely ignorant of
we're missing so much, I'm sure.
Me.
Yeah,
I mean, I can barely even identify what are different plants. Like
they're green leaves.
And you're like, there's a jumble of them. I don't know if that's like two different leaves from the same plant, or I don't know. And it feels like that's one of those sort of streams of knowledge that is highly connected to place. Not really the kind of knowledge that we celebrate very much now.
Well, we outsource all of it, so all our food and supplies, so we don't pay attention to our environment because we don't need to forage for it.
I also, but at the same time, it would be, it would be helpful if you had enough, at least enough plant awareness. I don't know if that, whatever, to identify poison ivy and poison oak and giant hogweed and these other things. They're like, if you touch them, you're going to get burned and maybe go blind. Like, don't rub your eyes.
Right. Which berries to eat, which mushrooms to eat.
When we were walking down the street the other day and my kids pointed at some berries on a tree and I said, "Oh, you don't eat those," delivering a line about, you never eat berries. And they said, that they'd seen somebody eat them and I didn't know what it was.
Oh boy.
And then a couple of days later, someone mentioned to me that mulberries grow on trees and look kind of like blackberries. And I was like, oh, that's what that thing is. It's a mulberry. There's famous songs about mulberry. Right? Like, it's an iconic plant. I was just completely ignorant of it, right?
Oh, sure,
and that's just seems dumb. Right?
We're missing a lot.
I'm missing a bunch of stuff. Some of that maybe is that I didn't grow up in this particular biome, and so and whatever, so I didn't develop that knowledge as a small child, and maybe my kids will have more of it. Clearly they do, because they could already identify that plant was edible. And I couldn't.
That'd be helpful.
Right, but
how old are the kids now?
5.
Nice. Twins. Awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty funny.
Yeah, I guess you can have conversations with the 5-year-old.
Totally. Totally. And sometimes fairly sophisticated conversations.
That must be pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. They love camping. They love being in the wilderness.
Are you noticing significant differences or similarities?
Like personality
twins?
differences?
Yeah. They're identical twins?
They're identical twins. One of them has a bit of a strabismus, so like a crossed eye, and so now wears glasses to correct it. And so they're easily
visually differentiated.
like now everybody knows who they are because they're like the kid with the glasses is Eleanor and the one without the glasses is Alice. Done. Yeah, when she doesn't wear her glasses, they get confused again. But yeah, no, they've definitely got personality differences. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you being I mean, you're somewhat scientifically inclined as well. I mean, I'm just thinking, if I had identical twins, I'd be paying attention to differences and similarities, and just it would be fascinating to.
Totally. It's funny though. I mean, how am I going to say? It's hard to disentangle. They're different people.
Sure.
And so. I don't know how different they are from other twins who don't happen to be genetically.
It's a limited sample for
exactly. It's a really limited sample, and like so anecdotally, I know that they'll have likes and dislikes that are more highly correlated than people who are more genetically dissimilar.
Yeah.
But.
And it's. I mean, just looking back at our own childhoods, it could be that you happened to be one day at recess talking to a friend and who had a little, I don't know, toy car with them, and you looked at it, and then that sparked an interest in maybe Hot Wheels or something, just because you happened to talk to that kid at that time, and so maybe your twin brother or sister didn't have that experience, so all of a sudden you went spiraling down this path, and they didn't go spiraling down that path. And things like that, then you have the the magnifying effect over the years. It's so easy to be divergent, and even if you start off with the exact same genetic makeup, you're going to be two totally different people, even if you're living in the same house with the same parents, with the same.
I mean, and like though they share a bedroom, but one sleeps on the top bunk, one sleeps on the bottom.
Different experience.
Slightly different experience in life. One of them identified purple at age like 15 months as her favorite color.
Yeah,
and
who knows
it's
why?
Persisted and it's her color, and that's been it. And it's gonna. And so like they are compounding differences, I think,
and it triggers other differences,
totally,
and it magnifies certain differences in other ones yet again.
But then being twins, being identical, and again, there's some placebo dimension here because they know that they're identical, and they like to dress the same sometimes. So they will, when they're getting themselves dressed in the morning, will sometimes like decide to dress same. But they're aware of their sameness, and so. That then becomes...
That's cool.
That maybe it limits how divergent they're going to be because they're aware that they're supposed to be similar.
Yeah.
Right?
Does
that dampen the...
I wonder. These intelligent assistants that we've been getting, like the
Let's
Siri
use scare
and
quotes.
Google. Scare quotes. And this Google demonstrated something recently, but where they had the automated assistant that made phone calls.
That made a hair appointment
on your behalf, and I could imagine these eventually will start to have your voice, so that it sounds just like you, and so that people might not even know that it's not you calling. And I'm thinking eventually this intelligent assistant is going to get more and more of your personality. In fact, it will know how you're going to respond to things, maybe 99% of the time, and you're going to let it. Yeah. And eventually this assistant is going to be a replica of you if it gets really good at it. So in a way, it'll be your identical twin.
or like
a disembodied version of you.
A disembodied, like, responding or, I guess even outreaching. That's a really...
That's going to be a little fucked up, I think.
It's going to be totally fucked up. I insist that my kids call machines it. I'm really resistant to gendering of machines and really anthropomorphize. It's hard to not anthropomorphize just because our language has a lot of...
Yeah, but even with the Tin Lizzy, we started with cars.
But not even just referring to it as entity, but like how we describe things like implies agency.
Yes.
Right. Like X is doing something, right? Like what does doing mean?
Or it doesn't
What
like
does,
that when you do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like there's sort of embedded anthropomorphizations. Yes. But I really try to resist my kids thinking that way. And in particular with that, the being reached out to by a machine impersonating a person, I think has to become a deeply we have to believe that that's deeply antisocial.
Yeah, there's something going on there that we haven't, we're just sensing there's something off there.
And I think that if you start, I dislike it when an assistant responds on behalf of somebody and doesn't write on the, like, that's how you write correspondence, right? Like on behalf of.
Yes.
And if we started accepting that machines can respond on our behalf without announcing it, or like that to me is just...
It's going to happen, though. I mean, not everyone's going to do it or take advantage of it, or maybe it might not be socially acceptable. Maybe it might be. But
I think that the response has to be that it's not socially acceptable.
I would agree.
Right.
But there's a lot of things that seem that way once it gets going. Then, a generation later, you don't even notice it as being weird. Like, I mean, people used to think it was weird to talk on a cell phone in public. That was only 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not anymore. In fact, now I haven't gone to a movie theater in a few years because even a couple of years ago when I went, it's younger kids are they don't think it's unacceptable to be texting in a movie or talking in a movie, where in my generation it was beyond the pale to do that. You just wouldn't do that.
Yeah. You're going to get popcorn thrown at your head. And
things change. Yeah.
I mean, I also think that there's a lag in terms of the entrenchment of new social norms around new technologies, right?
Yeah.
And so I have been to movies recently, and it may be that the people who attend movies, like the demographic has changed, and
that's
some
true
of
too.
But like they're pretty clear at the beginning, like turn off your goddamn phone. And I'll like peek in my pocket when it buzzes, and people will generally do that, but I don't see people texting openly with like bright lights shining in their faces.
Oh, maybe we figured it out. Like I said, I haven't gone in a couple of years. But,
I feel like some of those things, like there's just some lag, and then I mean, it's hard to judge if I am just immune to it now, but I remember in the 90s, being on a bus and people having like a straight up fight about because one of them was on their mobile phone.
Yeah.
and then the other person was yelling and screaming about like, don't expose me to your electromagnetic. Whoa. And so it was like, it sort of verged into conspiracy theory territory, but somebody was responding that badly because somebody was loud talking on their phone. And then now I don't really see people loud talking on their phones that much.
No, that's interesting, right?
Maybe it's because we just don't talk on phones anymore.
Or maybe it's the earpieces. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. That's who talks on phones anymore.
Yeah. It's like the only time I talk on my phone is like, on my car phone.
Really? Yeah, because your hands are...
I can't text because I'm driving.
I talk to my parents, and they're really almost 80 years old, so they don't text. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. See, that's a funny thing. Like I argue with... My dad is pretty good with... He texts. He uses all of the above.
Yeah.
My mom's pretty resistant to it. And you could kind of understand that, but you're like, but the way that everybody else is communicate it has moved on from carrier pigeon or whatever. So
yeah, well, I mean, we have that too. It's just like I'm not going to use Snapchat.
Yeah,
whereas the kids are going, why wouldn't you use Snapchat?
And we open the conversation with like, I'm only going to use email. Like, you want
exactly.
So the curmudgeon comes out.
I mean, we have our lines that we draw, unconsciously. But this is intelligent assistant that becomes more and more like you. I've been worrying about things like this for a little while, and that once we create intelligent essentially will be beings in some sense, whether or not human beings, there'll be some kind of a being. And what if that being that you created is actually meant to be a replica of you in some very important sense? What do you have? You have like another person that has the right to your rights in some sense? Is that
that, I mean, it's funny because the that vision of technology as like an intelligence augmentation, right? Which is kind of what all of these, that Google outreach device, whatever it was, is in a way, it's designed, or it appears to be designed, intended to augment your intent, right? Like it's an assistant, it's a helper, and
it's a stand-in,
and it's a stand-in, and you're using it to empower yourself. And that seems like a plausible vector that we're going to follow, like continuing to embed agency, again in scare quotes, in these devices. That's just like, it's just transferred agency. But to your point, at some point, that thing looks and sounds and behaves and enough like you that
it's gonna get
gets
uncanny.
pretty confusing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm less worried about, frankly, I'm less worried about, at what point are we going to give the machines rights? And more like, all right, so there's a model out there in the world that, has a good imprint of my voice, knows what my face looks like, knows a bunch of biographical details, because all that stuff is out in the world in various ways.
Well, this conversation you're having right now is going to give a lot of data to an AI to figure you out.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, that's a vector that human beings can exploit to undermine me in various ways, right? And that the threat I find more interesting is the threat from people.
Oh, no doubt. I agree with
the
you. I'm on board with you there.
Right?
Yeah. But they're the ones that are going to be developing the technologies to take advantage of that in nefarious ways.
Totally.
And I guess that's what we're doing. We're talking about it in advance. And you're having these conferences on robotics and AI. What was the name of it? It was
Future World.
Future World. Yeah. How did that go?
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I went to the first one.
Yes, you did.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. The second one was fairly similar event. Really interesting.
Anything cool that jumped out at you? I haven't even gone through to see what was there.
Bob Ferdosi, who got sort of internet famous as Mohawk guy during the Mars Curiosity landing in 2011 or whatever, spoke and talked a bunch about the challenges of deploying and then interacting with these impossibly complicated machines at impossibly distant distances, and then as they age and they stop being impossibly complicated and actually just become kind of crappy old technology, but like it's still the one that's on Mars.
It's like our bodies.
Yeah, exactly. And he has a funny slide about comparing the Curiosity rover to the then current phone, right? And it was like the iPhone 4 or something, and the iPhone 4 was substantially more powerful than the rover, which is like our most interactive emissary into the deep.
Right. Not our deepest probing, but our most interactive.
Right? And like and it's a device that has quite a lot of does a lot of stuff on its own. It does it slowly and whatever.
So it is allowed to make decisions?
I don't know that. I don't know like what degree of autonomy it has, but from what I understand, they will on a daily basis. There's sort of like there's a loop of it going off and doing stuff, collecting data, sending the data back, updating its position, and then humans on the ground basically while it's sleeping. Giving it an instruction set for the next day. But the instruction set has to have has to be open-ended enough that whatever changes during the day when the people can't see it, the rover can respond. So, like, yes, it has some limited autonomy in terms of how it drives, where it drives.
So it sleeps at night and gets updates, kind of like we do.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's much slower. Though.
Yeah.
I mean, those are fast. Like, those machines I find really fascinating. These, like, they're in themselves, they're time capsules, right? Like, we spent a lot of time putting together those, like, the goofy time capsule with, like, the Vitruvian Man picture and some like Beatles music or something to send up into space.
Laser disc of Pioneer.
And you're like, well, but really, the thing that if I were an alien civilization, the thing I would be more interested in, and it would be more illustrative of the like civilization that sent this stuff out, would be the machine it was in. Right.
Yeah, you're going to learn a lot from that.
Yeah, like you're going to learn way more than like, here's how we represented some music-y stuff.
That's going to be confusing, I think, even for a super advanced intelligence.
Which, music?
Just any of that symbolism and semantic, putting all that semiotics on a gold disc, it's going to be confusing. And, it's confusing enough for us to, anthropologists describe different cultures. And then if you're within that culture and you hear that description, you laugh at it sometimes because it's, you're seeing it from a totally removed position. And unless you're within that culture, that movement, that information cycles, it's not going to be the same. There's always going to be a distance.
Because and you hear about this in philosophy of science, that like that groups of scientists who are treated as sociological objects kind of get their hackles up at the flow of information and the patterns of association and things being sort of described sociologically, because they want at least their explicit motive, their articulated motive, is around this like noble pursuit of science or whatever. And then somebody else comes in and is like, well, it turns out that then maybe the story you tell yourself, but you also are a lot like a troop of chimpanzees or whatever.
Sure.
Right. Both of those realities can exist at the same time.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, this is it.
You can explain your motives one way and somebody else can explain your motives another way, and they can both be true.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of arguments that I see and hear in public discourse often basically is that you're operating within a framework and someone else is operating with another framework, but the argument is that my framework is right and to view it and yours isn't, or something like that. Whereas what you just said, both of those could be true. Many of those could be true. I mean, you operate within this is the thing I often see when people get into these internet arguments, and something to do with like Jordan Peterson's getting involved in a lot of these things where the term virtue signaling I keep hearing about. Oh, you're just virtue signaling. I mean, it's not just virtue signaling. Like, it might also be described as virtue signaling. It could also be described in social Darwinist framework. It could also be described within information theory. It could be described within the movements of sugar within the world. or energy capture by the sun, and
Scale
you're part
matters.
of that.
Right. You're like, this is just a nuance, like an imperceptibly irrelevant nuance of the movement of atoms at the edge of a spiral galaxy in a particular galaxy cluster.
Depending on the scale you're looking at, the slice of reality that you're looking at. And I think what we do is we kind of get into this mistaken assumption that the lenses through which we're looking is the lens to look through, and without realizing that there are lenses that we're looking through. And so what I'm saying is that being conscious of frameworks is somewhat very helpful. To realize that much argumentation seems to be from just not realizing that you're discussing or seeing the world through different lenses, different frameworks. What I think when you're a young man like I was in your 20s, it seems like it's pretty easy to see the world in terms of like mechanisms and points and like maybe even power struggles and like Darwinism and survival of the fittest and that sort of thing. And then anybody else who doesn't see it that way, you think, oh, you're just being naive. You're not seeing how it's actually the world is at core. But, as you get older, you realize, no, that's just one way of looking at it. And I can look at it in a dozen different ways.
It's interesting. I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about the value of certain flavors of education. And I think that we privilege in our education the particular lens that emphasizes the mechanistic view of the world, and either de-emphasizes or like explicitly denigrates the kind of more empathic or narrative driven view of the world, or just ways of engaging with the world. And it turns out that like engaging with other people, probably it's important to have some dimension of empathy, which is kind of like an ability to at least imagine that you might have another framework.
Yeah.
Like y'all are looking at the world from a different point of view. That's going to have important differences. But if you just...
But we're programmed to be like that, right? We're programmed, programmed is in quotes as well. But I mean, it's just, the habituation of our behavior patterns over a billion years of development. We have grown to see things black and white because it has served us well to survive. It has really no guarantee of being accurately reflecting the universe. It's only, reason that it's become that way is because it has served us well, as earlier versions of humans to develop in the ways that we did to survive, to procreate, and to get here. Sure, we went through very much a black and white way of seeing the world and the universe because that's what worked. When you get to this stage of development, you start to notice the other, layers and frequencies that we're looking at. But I sometimes wonder if that adds a whole bunch of confusion into the system until it's figured out. And I think this is what's happening, like writ large. It seems like a lot of people are becoming philosophical, let's call it, like discovering questions of philosophy, whether or not they realize that's what they're doing. A lot of the arguments that I'm seeing are basic philosophical questions now. It's like everyone's arguing about basic things that I remember, that the Greeks were concerned with, 2,500 years ago. And, Descartes, the cogito, the questions about the self, all of these things that everyone's figuring out all at once, and it's adding a lot of confusion. There's a kitty cat here. That's Iggy. He might want to sit on your lap.
Sorry, who?
Iggy.
Iggy? Hi, Iggy. You want to get up?
Jump up. Pick him up if you can. No, it's a very strange cat that just wants to be on your lap all the time.
Yeah, Iggy's a cute cat. Hi. I mean, that's interesting, the idea that like Twitter might just be like the Agora or something. And but it turns out that like the important part of the Socrates story and like the being a needling person who just asks annoying questions is that everybody wanted to kill him.
Yeah, it's true.
like he did die. Right? It was really annoying.
Have some hemlock.
Yeah, exactly. Like they wanted to get rid of that.
Yeah. And that is a danger. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. And I find a lot of intellectuals kind of, I think in that tradition, like to see themselves as martyrs in a way. Yeah. It's like, I have the truth and I'm being, pushed back against. And there is a natural inclination for us as groups to be very resistant to fundamental change and fundamental change of view. And again, we're programmed to be black and white. And
I also think fair enough, right? Like there's, this is going to come back to robots a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm most interested in around the infiltration of digital technologies into the physical space and the physical world, and some of the more the most influential thing that people have been talking about of late is self-driving cars and so on. And turns out that a bunch of the people who are working on those problems are fundamentally computer scientists. But it also turns out that most of the stuff that computer scientists have been working on, and in particular internet people have been working on, is pretty low value, not terribly threatening, easy stuff. And when you start building systems that look more like that look more like civil engineering.
Right.
You need to have a much more conservative approach. As not to say that the conservative approach of civil engineering and the various other disciplines that are traditionally much more high risk and higher value is the right approach, but it's just that it's resistant to like random fluctuations that lead to super bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. And so I also think that part of the, like one of the benefits of us generally being slow to change is, we're relatively slow to adopt bad error modes.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true. No,
and it turns out that when we do
it's a
adopt bad error modes, it can be really bad, right? Like like a status quo bias in society is probably it can be annoying.
Yep.
But in the long run, it probably keeps us from tearing ourselves apart.
Well, like with anything, it's finding that balance. Not going too fast forward and not being stuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's figuring out how to keep moving. I mean, it's funny because American politics, probably, I don't want to discuss it too much, but people complain about the intransigence of the Senate. Like they never get anything done. And you're like, but turns out that was that's sort of a feature, right? That hopefully it does constrain the particular faddish, like the fad du jour of whatever it is.
Fads and bad actors and
and
impulsivity.
But that also means it kind of stinks. Like if the fad is like, we should probably not treat people as chattels. Like that's hard to change.
What? That's going to cost me a lot of money. Who's going to pick the cotton?
Like and
it's economic reasons.
That was difficult to change, and but then there's other things that maybe we haven't adopted. Yeah. Or they haven't adopted that would have been very destructive. It's not clear that if they didn't have like a slow moving, annoying multi-party system, that they wouldn't have descended into fascism when everybody else did. And so that would have been bad too.
Well, it's like, but that kind of makes sense. Because the body politic is kind of like our bodies in a sense that, I was just talking recently about, I often know what I need to do to improve something about my life, or, like the fact that I'm not getting a lot of podcasts out lately. It was really basically bottlenecking on the fact that I can't get off the couch and get over here and record a 5-minute introduction monologue to some of the episodes that are in the can. I know intellectually what I need to do, but that's not enough. You have to kind of create these patterns of behavior, like new habits, to basically experience that experience differently, without anxiety, and to visualize it differently, but to do it differently. You have to actually do it a few times differently, right? You have to repeat that cycle a few times.
That's funny, and again, I'm going to mangle it, but Nick Cave talks about the work of an artist. Yeah. He's like, you just fucking do it. Get up in the morning and write some shit. Yeah.
It is that easy, but it's that hard.
And well, totally, but it's also just treating these things as habits, as burdens, as just things that you have to do. Yeah. You taught, what's the Jerry Seinfeld method? Yeah. So he would keep a wall calendar, and I don't know what his target would be, but it would be every day writing 2 jokes or something, right? And he would check off, physically keep a record of every day. And so
that would work.
Yeah. And he just wanted to maintain a string of days. And it's been replicated in a bunch of sort of self-helpy, get things done methodologies.
Well, writers always tell me, write 1,000 words a day, get up and do it. Don't worry about it.
Get up at 7 every day. And if they're crappy 1,000 words, that's fine. Yeah. You just do it. And at some point it's not that it ever clicks, but at some point you're done.
Well, at some point it becomes ingrained within your loops, within your
Yeah.
cycles, within what's normal parameters for you. So it doesn't stick out like an anomaly, doesn't create anxiety, doesn't create this, fluctuation within you. It's because that's part of your normal processes.
Yeah.
But you have to do that several times. And maybe it's something like, I don't know, there must be some addiction research or something, what I've heard, that 3 weeks is somehow relevant amount of time for some habits to be ingrained within you. And that might be similar for any kind of behavior. I don't know. It's not necessarily chemical or anything like that. Like I'm sitting on that couch there, and I got to move over here. It's like 30, 40 feet away.
It's far.
But until I do it 20 times, it's going to be hard for me to get into that loop again.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I started running a bunch of years ago, and tried to do it 3 days a week. Sort of had this cadence that I thought made sense, and it turned out like I just couldn't keep it up. And then at one point I was like, no, I'm gonna run every day.
Yeah,
and it was way easier to run every day. Then I sort of hurt my back a little bit. Like I had this weird pain. I had to go to physio. My physiotherapist told me I had to stop running for a little bit.
You're out of that loop.
And then I was out of that loop. And then around the same time I started climbing. And I climb 2 days a week on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 6 a.m., which is, I would normally go running at 6 a.m. And so now my schedule is 2 days a week climbing and the remaining 3 days a week notionally running. But again, it's hard for me to keep that schedule.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to figure out how to reintegrate running back into, like, how to re-habituate it.
I think you're right, though. Doing something every day is easier than 3 times a week. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's what's his name? Who's the disruption writer? Clayton Christensen.
All right.
So he
was at our overlap.
Oh, was he?
That's amazing. Overlap Toronto we had.
He is a Mormon and is a religious Mormon, and whatever. He talks about like habits and also commitments being pretty similar and like tightly overlapped. And he wrote a book. I cannot remember what it was called.
Yeah, I think I have it on my bookshelf.
But it was sort of like a vaguely self-helpy like story of himself. And he talks about how he played basketball in university. He went to Cambridge, I believe. And then, the bar is pretty low for basketball in the UK. So his Cambridge team was playing in the like UK championships. And he was a star-ish player, and it turned out that the final was on a Sunday. And he talked about it like sort of being a moral dilemma for him because as a religious Mormon, Sunday is his day of rest. He had always gone to church or temple and always just taken that as a day of rest. And he ultimately decided that he wasn't going to play in the championship, which is a sacrifice for him, but that not keeping your commitments once leads to like it cascades. It's easier to not keep your commitment the next time and the next time and the next time. And it works both ways, right? The good habits and bad habits are like that.
Totally. If you're going to quit doing something, you got to quit doing it for a day, at least for it to be 2 days.
Yes. And
got to start.
Yeah.
It sounds easy.
Yeah. Have you ever been a smoker?
No. Well, I mean, weed smoker.
Yeah.
But that's it. Not tobacco.
I sort of smoked cigarettes like socially, but never like I would never buy cigarettes and have them.
Right.
But I look at people who do and how difficult it is to stop. I think because it's easy to rationalize often. It's just, I'm having a beer with my friend.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to have one, whatever.
Or it's a bad day today. Let me just get over this hump and tomorrow I'll do it. Yeah, there's always something.
That cascades so easily. And you're like, no. If you want to not smoke, don't smoke.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
If you want to not rob banks, don't rob banks.
Yeah. It's true. And I've been also trying to quit smoking weed, and it's more difficult than I thought. and it's because I realized within this past year or so, I've been doing it almost every day, pretty much every day. But at a certain point, I realized it's not even affecting me anymore. Like, I'm not really getting high in any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It might be relaxing me a little bit, but maybe not even that. But it's more of a habitual process.
Mm-hmm.
And even knowing all of this intellectually, I still find myself, just not completely thinking about it. Maybe someone's come over and then, we just smoke a joint. I don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm. And then you find yourself at the end of the day, you're like, I was supposed to be quitting that.
Right. Yeah. And because of that, it's harder the next day. And,
I'm gonna show. So this is the weird, I have an email I get for myself every day.
Mm-hmm.
That is my daily things form. And I record what time did I wake up? Did I eat meat? Did I drink alcohol? Did I write 500 words?
Is that an app or what is
No,
that?
it's just like a Google Forms
thing,
and it goes into a Google spreadsheet. And,
I like that.
There's some of these are just things that I want to. Did I do 20 minutes of exercise? Did I stretch? Did I write in my journal?
That's very helpful.
Behaviors that I want to, and there's some of them that I am like catastrophically bad at. So like writing in my journal just doesn't happen. And so at some point I maybe like gave it the old college try. That's not a habit I'm going to adopt.
Right.
But then the other ones are ones that I want to adopt and that I try to meet. And I have a target on the year. I have a target on the week, whatever.
How long have you been doing that?
I have like 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I have year-on-year data, and I like update at the end of the year. I'm like, I drank alcohol 33% of days last year. This year, I would like to get to 25%.
Because you're going to see emergent patterns that you wouldn't recognize.
Exactly. And so, and I recognize, I went camping on the weekend. And we're camping, we're going to have a beer or a glass of wine. And then in order to offset those camping cheat days, maybe I shouldn't do cheat days, whatever. But
and you can tag
I try to be
those.
fairly conscious of some of those behaviors.
I mean, you could even, for example, correlate the times you were with, more than one person as opposed to being alone or being with two people, or you did certain type of activities of this and that. And then you can see, I didn't realize it, but I'm actually a lot happier on the days when I'm doing these kind of things or as opposed to these kind of things.
I'm like, I wonder if I could...
Could be a lot of data points you could put in there just by tagging each of those or categorizing each of those activities in different ways or multiple ways. Like, going out with friends could be categorized as social, as the number of people that were there, the foods versus drinks, or, that sort of thing.
So that's something that, because I have this like personal goal of being alcohol free 80%, and that's my number, I think on this year is 80% of days.
Oh, okay.
So I can only have any alcohol 1 in 5 days.
That sounds reasonable.
Which is less than 1 day a week, right? Or less than 2 days a week, less than the weekend, excuse me.
Right.
Right. Less than both days of the weekend in any given week. It means that I have to, and I'm typically social on the weekends, and so it means I have to regulate my behavior when I'm being social. And so I found myself being much more comfortable just being like it's a Thursday. Hey, you can crush G&Ts all you want. I'm just gonna have soda water because it's tasty and I don't want to be hungover in the morning and fine. And so it's I've recontextualized some of those behaviors as commitments to myself, and then just found ways to work it in socially.
Well, that's great.
There's a guy, and I'm trying to remember his name now. I'm going to search for it on my phone.
But this is the thing. You have to be, it seems, for this to work, you have to be conscious. That is, like, you use your, cerebral frontal cortex to make the decisions to do these behaviors. Yes. But you have to kind of trick your body into repetition so that it feels comfortable repeating these things over and over again. It's not enough to make a decision is what what we're getting at. Yep. And by keeping track of that, that's half of it, right? The other half of it, but it makes it easier for you to create new loops and habits, just because you're kind of outsourcing that
Yeah, and to your point, you could track it against other stuff in your environment. If you're getting really nuanced, like you track your mood, you do a bunch of things. I'm sure you can find some complicated correlations. But at the very least, for me, I do think, and when I figured out running 5 days a week, which I've also not been able to maintain, but at the end of it, I would get home. So I'd run from 6 to 7. I'd get home at 7. Everybody in my family would still be asleep. I'd make myself a cup of coffee. I would quietly, I'd have a nice morning sort of session. And so my reward to myself at the end of a run would be this kind of quiet morning ritual, which sort of gives a positive reinforcement to a behavior that running's not that fun. Often otherwise, but
you feel great after.
You feel good after, but it's if I had ended the run with being kicked in the head 7 times it would have been a pretty strong negative reinforcement, right? But reinforcing these things with rewards and so on, when you see people quitting smoking again, especially when you work. Quitting smoking is a significant punishment because it means you have to work more because you're not allowed to leave your desk.
Right.
And so people smoking was it was a little escape from your shitty work day.
Yeah.
You stand outside, have a little conversation.
Yeah.
And so if you want to quit smoking at work and you have this positive reinforcement associated with smoking, you can't just remove it. You've got to reinforce.
Maybe go out there, but not smoke.
Yeah. Or
sit under
go
a
and play
tree.
video games for a few minutes, read a funny something. And I mean, that's probably different now because everybody spends all of their time at work just on YouTube anyway. But
what we're talking about here is basically, we have a mind-body issue in a way.
Yeah.
And, when I was younger, that was more distinct for me. I would, think in terms of mind and body. And then as I got older and a little bit more sophisticated, I realized, no, it's kind of a dance between the two, and you really shouldn't put too much emphasis on one or the other. But again, I'm going back again now, more recently, is that, no, you have to put emphasis on the cognitive to make the decisions and then start these new loops and basically let your body reinforce it. But it's still a dance. And, it's
because there are some things that we are embodied beings, right? The distinction might just be an illusion anyway.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah. It's the way we choose to slice it that we look at it.
And so it might also be the case that there are some habits, even if they're socially, they would be good things to adopt or to stop doing, that for whatever reason your body just wants to do them.
Yeah.
And so back to the question of the medical officer of health for the city of Toronto,
right,
suggesting that we legalize all currently illegal drugs. There's a pretty persuasive case to be made that there are some people who just really like heroin. Yeah. And they're not going to stop because they really like it. It's it's a rich and meaningful thing for them to do in their lives. I don't get to judge that sounds ridiculous, but I don't get to judge what's rich and meaningful to other people. And maybe the answer is for us to figure out ways to make those bad habits, again, in scare quotes, to make them have fewer negative consequences, right? To defang the bad habitness of the bad habit rather than try to extinguish the bad habit.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a bunch of things in us, that's a bad habit, but turns out I'm an embodied being. And I don't get to make all the decisions about that. And maybe you want to just, defang them.
Right. And prohibition often has the opposite effect.
Totally.
Like you see with kids all the time. You tell them not to do something, they want to do it more.
They want to do it.
And, in the case of Portugal decriminalization, the number of addicts went down. And that seems to be the case. And like we're having an issue here in Toronto about safe injection sites and so on. What is the point of telling someone, just don't do it or we'll put you in jail? How does that, it doesn't help anybody. You got to get them into new loops. And if you medicalize it, I think it's a better approach than criminalizing it.
I mean, it's funny, like the, I don't know of any large scale society countries that treat these things any differently, but like, just the idea that we might have any input into what you do. Right. See, like that I guess is sort of like Western individualism, libertarianism-y, social libertarianism-y stuff, whatever. But the idea that that's even like that would be the default approach seems kind of crazy to me. Like,
it does.
I don't care what you do, and you should be able to do that. Yeah. And like, there's a fist hits the nose kind of. Like, I'm sympathetic to that being the point that the state or somebody steps in, but
most often,
but like you should be able to have a safe place to inject drugs.
Yeah, why not? I mean, people are going to do it anyway.
And we should also help you because we know that that's potential. There's some like very significant potential harms. I think it behooves us as a collective, as a society, as a whatever, help out those people and figure out ways to minimize those risks. But in particular, when people aren't going to stop because they have other reasons to not want to stop.
Right. And those state prohibitions are only going to just add extra heat to the system and unintended consequences and lots of economic costs, and prisons and oppression.
Dude,
and
I mean, like the body count from opiates in North America right now is apocalyptic. Yeah. It is, and it's explicitly because of a bunch, like the interaction loop between like globalized shipping and prohibition and a bunch of stuff, but like tens of thousands of people are dying. Yeah. And like, maybe if we figured out a way to have like clean fentanyl or clean heroin or whatever instead, a bunch of those numbers would come down. Like a huge difference. And those are people's lives, and I don't know. I think yes, save injection sites.
We're for it. Yeah. Let me check the time here.
Okay.
How are you for time?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need a break or anything?
No.
All right.
Keep going. I'm happy to chat.
I was listening to a little podcast earlier today about the Fermi Paradox.
Okay.
Do you know about this? Where Fermi basically was opining one day about where are all the aliens, essentially?
This was like there's X number of stars in the galaxy and various probabilities, and you multiply them all together, and we should have seen one by now.
Right, but then you have to really consider a lot of things. For example, like, is life inevitable? If if you get a planet with a bunch of carbon and oxygen, and you shake it around for a few billion years, is something going to come out of that? First of all, is life going to come out of it? That's one question. The other thing is, if life does come out of it, does it necessarily lead to intelligent life, whatever we call intelligent life? When considering that there's, billions and billions, as Carl Sagan would say, star systems in our galaxy alone. One of the Drake equation calculations is that there could be like 126 or 156 million. There should be, according to some calculation, 156 million intelligent species in our galaxy alone.
I'm going to interject for a second.
Depending on how you...
So the Drake equation is the equation that
trying to figure
sort of pumps out how many of these there should be.
Right.
And then the Fermi paradox is just the but then we look out there and we don't see
any. Right. Okay. Right. But that equation is so highly variable. It's basically an unbound, it's a binding problem because I mean, depending on what you plug into each of those variables, you can go from anywhere from 0 to 156 million is the likely, because we don't have all the information about, for example, how likely is life?
Yeah, we can like make
yeah,
up a number, but it's probably just made up.
Yeah, but whatever it is, it's huge. But I mean, it got me.
Did you ever read the Dark Forest trilogy?
No, what's that?
The Three Body Problem, the Xixin Liu
No,
book?
I'm not familiar with that.
It's fun.
Tell me about it.
Chinese science fiction. It's like the first sort of blockbuster in English Chinese science fiction. The blurb, I think, on the second book had in English. So the Three Body Problem, they were all published in Chinese in about, I think, 2005 to 2011 or something, and then started coming out in English, translated by this guy Ken Liu. In 2014, and the blurb on the second one, which I think came out in 2015 or 16, had a Barack Obama was like the pull quote.
Oh yeah.
All right, so you're like, that's a thing. So like it reached a pretty high level. At any rate, the story is broadly about an alien civilization contacting Earth. And then there's this idea of the dark forest, which is that any civilization that the sufficiently advanced civilizations will just be terrified of the consequences of any emergent civilization. Yeah. And so the reason that we don't hear from them is because they're not broadcasting.
That's
and that any civilization that does broadcast gets extinguished.
Yeah, it's kind of like the tall poppy. You don't want to be that tall poppy.
Yeah. And so that as soon as a civilization gets to, or like that an alien civilization gets to the point that they can broadcast their location, if they're dumb enough to do it, then fairly soon one of these like sophisticated civilizations will just extinguish them.
But we've already broadcast, right?
And so that's sort of the point for Earth. It's like, well, we're fucked.
Maybe it's inevitable. I mean, until you figure that out, you're gonna spout out some radio waves or whatever that's gonna indicate that. And so it could be that once we put out the radio waves, within the last century, they're onto us and they're on their way over here.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you have 156 million species, one of them is going to take on this challenge of going out and killing every other species.
Yeah, one of them is going to be the predator.
Right.
And so that's the entire argument is that, of those 156 million species or whatever, one of them is going to be the predator, which means that if you don't want to die, you have to be the predator.
Wow.
Right. And so.
But we got a lot of assumptions.
So you immediately become and whatever.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, it sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
But a lot of these assumptions are built in that. I mean, we're applying the framework of Darwinism, of course. When you could argue that that's got to be throughout the galaxy. That when you have information systems, even ones that are able to repeat are the ones that proliferate, and the ones that aren't able to repeat don't proliferate. So you're going to have some magnification of certain processes and certain movements and certain people and species. Does an intelligent species necessarily have curiosity, for example? You would say probably, but what about violence? Is that necessary? Is that, like killing? I don't know. There's a lot of things that we take for granted because we grew up within this primate body, and a lot of the things we do are built upon these, and a lot of our culture is really just sophisticated, more, artifice-filled ways of doing what we used to do when we were, like the chimps are now. And it's hard to transfer that over to a different species on a different galaxy somewhere, and how they would develop given their environment will be radically different.
Well, I mean, the idea, we are very scale dependent as well. Excuse me. And we're scale dependent. Our particular flavor of intelligence is pretty path dependent. Like we got here being like big biological sacks that need to eat and have sex and do some other things, and so like, maybe it's the case that given the range of potential scales in the universe, one of the reasons we haven't perceived any of those 150 million other intelligences is just their scales are completely out of whack.
That's true too.
Right. And so you're like, I don't know, maybe like there's an intelligent galaxy out there.
Yeah.
There's an entire civilization that lives on a golf ball somewhere. Right.
Yeah. Microscopic.
and then we're just so out of scale that it doesn't.
It could be a time scale as well, like something that's very slow moving. Like a tree is. Maybe if you sped up the tree, maybe it's having an intelligent life.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like,
communicating.
We just can't perceive it because we are so trapped inside our particular, spatial and temporal scale.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's true. There's a lot of research coming out that a lot of these forests are connected by fungal networks underneath, and there's like grand economies going through, and there's information being exchanged. There's decisions being made. Mm-hmm. It's like a fungal network is which trees require certain nutrients, so they'll take it from one and give it to another, so that the health of the forest actually balances out better. So it's working out stuff. Mm-hmm. Consciously, unconsciously, I don't know. What does that even mean at that scale?
Have you seen these slime mold experiments?
No.
So like slime mold is a particular form of colony of mold, slime stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
And the one that got sort of the most press was a distribution of food that correlated to the population density at various train stations in Tokyo. And then the slime mold just like distributed itself inside this petri dish that was populated with these little caches of food, and it laid itself out in a network that like very closely matched the actual layout of the train network in Tokyo.
Right. Well, that's a fractal nature of the universe. It seems like information flows the same way, whether it's a slime network or whether it's a switching packet network.
People choosing to lay out train
roads,
systems. Like, are we that different from the slime mold? Like, what does that imply about us and about slime mold?
It's like asking the bee what the hive is doing. They're not going to have an answer necessarily, but the hive seems to have kind of an intelligence of its own in some sense because it's behaving in a certain way collectively.
I mean, and those are funny. Like, and again, I don't know anything about zoology in addition to not knowing anything about biology, but like I've heard that people will talk about the organism unit for bees being the hive. Like they talk about hive death.
Yeah, I could see that.
I've never heard of us talking about city death. Right. And human beings probably are less completely social animals than bees are. Like we can survive. There's such a thing as hermits or lone wolf people, but
a lone bee doesn't really exist.
I don't think that's a thing. Might be, I don't know, but but like, like at what point, like at what scale do you just kind of arbitrarily decide is the organism?
I think all of them are organisms at different scales, right? Yeah. And we just happen to be within this scale, so we think everything is here, but we're part of other larger networks. And within us, there are smaller systems and networks that are at play that could even be said to have a being of their own. I mean, if you think about what do you call the subconscious or the body systems or these are kind of like proto entities that are within you. They're complex enough to be called a being, but they don't necessarily talk most of the time.
See, and that's the important thing. So like when we talk about artificial intelligence or whatever, like there's a lot of like hankering about what the word intelligence means and like what it actually means is human-like, right? Like that's definition. It's not usually, it's like that is the definition of what intelligence is. It's stuff that people do. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so it almost seems not meaningful to talk about things having intelligence that aren't sufficiently analogous to us, right?
Yeah, it's a slipperier concept than we think. Yeah.
It totally is, right? And we want to separate intelligence away from needing to eat, but like. That's a pretty strong motivator for doing anything, right? When you're sitting on your couch, kind of bored, like what is it that gets you up and doing things? It's being hungry.
Right.
And And so, like, how do you disentangle the thing that motivates the action from the intelligence, in scare quotes, that actually executes the action? Like,
well, see, there's conscious intelligence, there's unconscious intelligence.
Yeah.
Like the cat that just came by here. I think it's a genius in some ways,
Yeah.
but not in a cognitive way. Like it reacts to the universe and it reacts to me in certain ways that are almost psychic. And,
Yeah.
you know, like it figures out what I'm feeling sometimes and things I can't do. So it's more intelligent than me in a lot of ways, but not in the human intelligent way.
exactly. And
Right.
I mean, I think that what we mean by consciousness maybe is like this sense of like narrative sense of self.
Yes.
I don't know if cats have a narrative
I don't
sense
think
of
they
self,
do.
but
Mainly because they don't have words, I think.
yeah, but did
Words
Coco,
add that.
like
Yeah.
Coco, the gorilla that just died a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago? Coco certainly seemed to, like, Coco could refer to herself.
Yeah.
Coco could explicitly express wants. And
Yeah.
I think, like, Coco clearly had some
I think so.
narrative sense of self. And, like, and how that's distributed through many it just gets slippery, is all
It
it is. Like,
does,
it just
yeah.
gets slippery, right? Like,
Yeah.
do cats have words?
Well, I mean, they recognize words. They can't form them, so... But you need more than a few words. I mean, like Coco had more than a few words.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, sentences.
But I
for
mean,
example.
like,
there's narratives in there.
I don't know. I mean, there are some things that are really edifying when you can articulate them. But there are a lot of like kinds of thinking that are that are maybe still symbolic, but not to the level of words. There are like different sensory kinds of thinking. I don't know. I think the cats probably do that. You know, like they're
And
strategizing.
We
They're
do
like,
too. A lot of it.
there's a wall there. I know what wallness is. There's a hole in the wall. I know what wholeness is. There's
Right.
mouse in the hole in the wall. I know what mouseness is. Right? Like I'm developing a strategy for when and how that mouse.
Or do they react in habitual patterns so much that it becomes like if you can imagine a system that just doesn't have to be conscious necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, but then like,
in
and
the
I
way
don't
we
remember
think of
where
it.
the joke
Yeah.
I heard. The joke, which is like, why do birds fly south for the winter? Instinct. Why do Canadians fly south for the winter? Right? Like,
It's also instinct.
it's instinct, and you're like, but like disentangling what.
Right. What we do is we add other layers on top of it. It's like, like I said, we do a lot of the things that the chimps do. It's just we talk about it and we reflect about it, and then we tell another narrative story about it. And so as a result, we understand it differently, and then that adds a whole other loop and layer of behavior on top of that. It's kind of like self-reflexive loops over and over again. But we're starting out the same way. We're just adding a whole bunch of artifice to it. That's complicating shit.
A bunch of layers of lies and rationalizations that we tell ourselves. I mean, there's that... there was the study about judges, Israeli judges sentencing or granting of parole and correlating into time of day. And like how like first thing in the morning, you're basically fine, but your like probability of being granted parole like plummets just before lunch. And then right after lunch, like y'all are fine again.
Yeah.
And like,
forget about it if he's a smoker.
What's that?
If he's a smoker.
Yeah, exactly.
And
like
he's not getting a cigarette. You're
it
fucked.
may be true that there are some other confounds in there
Sure.
that like, I don't know, like court clerks put the easier, more obviously lenient things, they front load them or something, like, and the more contentious things toward the end of the day. So there's going to be some other sort of time-based questions, but like it seems pretty clear that like you didn't sentence or you didn't give that person parole because you're mad because you're hungry, right? You're just feeling cranky. And like we can't. You know, like,
there's a lot of
you
that
can
going on.
rationalize why,
Yeah.
like you can tell another story, but you're like, I was hungry.
But it's not even apparent or noticed. I mean, it's only when you look, when some social scientist researches and studies it and looks for the patterns. But if you were to ask the people within that system, they wouldn't even necessarily notice those patterns happening. But they are reflected or reflections of our body systems behaving in the way they do, and then we just make sense of it in a narrative framework. Most of the time, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, we're just doing.
Yeah, I mean, and so to your point, like there's a point where it becomes important to like mindfully or consciously like articulate your intention so that you can use some of these data tools.
That's kind of a course correction, I think of it as.
Yeah. And so, and so I keep my funny little daily log of the stuff I do. Because that gives me a tool to then assess whether or not my animal instincts,
right,
like prevented me or changed me put me on a different course. And like when you're talking about the scale of a society, it's even more difficult to disentangle like those reflexive behaviors from the intentional ones. It's probably useful to have some sort of social scientist being like, yeah, but you totally are missing the point.
It's true.
You need to recalibrate some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the society at large or species at large, you can sometimes think of it in terms of the narrative or metaphor of a body itself, and then you can talk about things like, like inflammation reactions and like antibodies and, like a damaged organ. And it makes sense within those frameworks as well. And then once you look at, you could be part of the liver of the society, because your purpose is to like filter out ideas and then spread it back to the world in a way that's not as destructive, and so in a way you're kind of like the liver and somebody else is kind of like the heart because he's, I don't know, maybe producing things in a factory or something or moving stuff around.
Like biomimetic metaphors for society. I'm sure that there's an entire.
There must be.
I don't nothing about that, but I feel very confident that there's an entire literature of biomimetic metaphors for
no doubt
what people do.
Yeah.
It's hard to avoid. Like you look at traffic and you're like, that clearly is something like blood flow, like the flow of particles through various kinds of vents and
as you've said, the network is laid out like the slime mold, like the roads. I mean, it just because that's how information flows, and we're kind of part of information networks. And not to diminish, it's just another way to look at it at a more different layer. At this layer, that's what we are. That doesn't mean we're only that or just that. Like some people like to say, oh, we're just information patterns, or you're just a sugar processing plant, or you're just, whatever. You're not just that. You're also that. If you happen to look
justness is the problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. It's justism. it's justism. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because we want, and again, not to talk about various political trends, but it's easy to do two things. It's easy to find the simple solutions appealing, but it's also easy to mock people for finding the simple solutions appealing. And so in terms of traffic, there was a suggestion, I'm going to say by the Toronto Board of Trade or the Toronto Area Board of Trade, whatever, one of those, basically saying that like a major economic issue in Toronto is the ability of goods to flow into and out of and across the city. And so what we need to do is we need to basically like double decker the 401.
Right.
You're like, well, that sounds insane.
It does.
But it also sounds insane because what you're talking about is a behavioral experiment and that you're giving a specific prescription without really testing what the impact of that intervention will be, right? And you're like, that's a hypothesis, and it's probably testable. Actually running that experiment, putting a double decker is really, really hard and expensive, and we're probably not going to do it. But you can run simulations. Yep. And it turns out that like traffic simulation is a pretty sophisticated thing, and like a lot of these traffic simulators pretty convincingly show that when you add capacity, you add congestion. Yeah. And that's very counterintuitive, right? Like take away the lanes, less congestion. Yeah. Add more lanes, more congestion.
Well, if you lay more fiber optic cable, we find bullshit YouTube videos to go through it.
Exactly. Like we're going to fill the capacity, right? And then once that capacity, we hit the capacity limit, then the consequences are much worse because now you have 16 lanes that are backed up rather than just like one. Right. And whatever.
And a whole bunch of other emergent problems that come from that societal.
But though, like, that's a really weird thing to communicate, and how you communicate that, and how you figure out how to come to those decisions when the intuitively obvious answer is, I want to watch more YouTube videos, therefore give me more capacity. Or
What
give me
if,
more bandwidth.
What if it turns out, and this is what I'm starting to suspect, and it sounds kind of politically incorrect to say this and maybe somewhat elitist, but what if most people don't have the cognitive capacity to figure out shit like that? And, you know, a lot of us are shaking our heads at why are people voting for Donald Trump and Doug Ford and people like that? And it just seems like so crazy to some people because they're missing certain very simple bits of information or processing capability to realize that it's kind of counterproductive to their own health and safety and you know, prosperity.
I would counter that that some of the narrative of like against people's interests, like it's very difficult for me to identify what's in your best interest, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the Trump voter is quite well aware that on certain dimensions, Donald Trump is very much in their interest. They're like, I'm a white dude who's old. I don't fucking care about anybody else. I just want whatever, my taxes cut a little bit.
Right.
And so, like, sure, it's in fact in
but
their...
what if they're not thinking it through? What if they're just feeling
But then
it?
I don't
What
think
if they
any
don't
of
have
us
the
are.
cognitive capacity to actually think it through? What if it turns out like 80% of the people are just not capable of certain high level thinking? Again, this sounds pretty elitist, but what if that's the case? What do we do?
Then technocrats, I mean, like...
Democracy then becomes somewhat kind of problematic here.
See, I mean, I think that what I come to is that, like, I don't have the capacity to understand most, like, the subtle workings of most systems.
Most of us don't. Yeah.
Right? And like, I don't think that... I think you have the capacity to understand. You just don't have the energy or the time. Or, like, probably if you, like, sat and worked your way through it, you could figure out most systems. Like, people made them.
You don't
but,
actually
like,
get around to understanding all
yeah,
of it,
exactly.
even if you have the capacity for it.
It's you don't have the capacity to understand most or all systems, right? You can understand one or two. But that doesn't mean that you don't get, like, that you don't get input into them. The thing that I think is tricky is... And it's, you know, it's like death of expertise-y kind of stuff. But I feel like we want to take the technocrats seriously, even if we don't always take their prescriptions seriously. Like when somebody's looked into something pretty deeply, like at least take their point of view.
Yeah.
Right. And you can be like, your goals, the goals that you're articulating in your prescription are antithetical to me. But at least I should be serious about how you analyze the problem or something.
Yeah. Or I mean, one question that we're failing to ask is, do we even want the same things? I mean, I sometimes see political arguments about, okay, are we actually moving towards the same thing or different things? Because we're going to have a different argument that way. Like if my goal is to give everybody equal rights or whatever, and yours isn't, then we're arguing. It doesn't matter what we're arguing about. We want different ends. We're going to have totally different. It doesn't even make sense to argue sometimes.
See, in some of that, I mean, political problems. There are other solutions to political problems, which involve guns and other unpleasant stuff, right? And so, like, we've kind of made sort of part of the deal is, like, sometimes we come up with shitty solutions because the alternative is bloodshed or whatever. And, like, there is always another solution. And, like, and sometimes that's the problem with these technocratic responses is you're like, no, what we're talking about is, like, murdering people in their sleep, right? As the alternative, right? Like, and like, I often think about, I had a conversation with a friend of mine about weekends. Right. And it's like, you know, weekends, it's a normal thing and whatever. And then, excuse me, talking about the inevitability of things like weekends. You're like, no. Weekends were not inevitable. Like, people banded together in unions and they had strikes and it, like, factory owners like hired goons to kill them, and then they like murdered factory owners in their beds, and it was messy. And then we came to this detente around unions and like a particular power structure that allowed us to not have to have those violent solutions.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I find frightening about the dismantling of some of these power structures is, yes, the power structure sucks. Yes, it's frightening, or yes, it's a bad solution.
Yeah.
But the other one is...
Yeah, there's you
seem like that's a dark view, but
yeah. Well, I think you're getting at this tension when you go from the descriptive to the prescriptive. It's like, I mean, there's the problem that I've had with people like Marx, for example, who sometimes you might say has a really good description of capitalism, but the prescription to get around that is not necessarily what you're going to choose. And all of those are biases that are built in how you're looking at it in the first place, and what your goal is, and you're not necessarily. We're not going to agree on what we want. We're not going to agree on, even if we did, how to get there. So it's never going to be just right. There's always going to be that tension and heat and friction between these systems. So we kind of had to maybe think about it as a meta problem. Like, how do we deal with these frictions? Before we even start talking about it, like set up a structure of communication in a way, and maybe that's too prescriptive.
I mean, that's what people say. Like, that's the governing dogma in the United States is that there were some smart guys who set up a really good system for communicating and resolving disputes. And that's what the Congress and the separation of powers and whatever it is, and then our flavor on that is like a Westminster, like a parliamentary democracy, Westminster model derivative thing, which is kind of the same, but slightly different. And like, that's what that dogma is that there are ways you can set it up.
It's kind of like, it's a meta solution. It's setting up a structure so that structures can be built and maintained.
But then what the real structures are and again, it's, what are the lies that we tell ourselves? Like, the fiction may be that the decisions get made in these bodies, but really they get made in much more complicated ways out in society, and who knows how those things are being disrupted. And
maybe they're being made at levels that we're not necessarily privy to. Like like I said, if we're a bee and you're looking at the beehive, there's processes at play, and then you get into like Hegelian philosophy of like spirit developing, and we are kind of like manifestations of spirit developing. It's another story to be told. Or if you're religious in a different way, you can think about it as like the mind of God is, and we're part of it, and that sort of thing. These are all narratives that could be helpful. But what we do is we have wars over disallowing other ones, which is kind of a shame.
It's funny because as soon as you say like, I like to think of myself as relatively open-minded. But as soon as you use the word war, and like I talked about like murdering people in their beds and stuff, there are certain kinds of political discourse, like war and like murdering people in their beds, that I personally find completely beyond the pale. But governments engage, like governments and like people that are like, we engage in them. People do it.
Your hive does.
And then there's a really complicated system about how we accept that. And
it's absurd when you think about it. Like, I mean, we have like the American military or Canadian military sends agents, people into another territory. It's like you have a condo corporation, right? And the condo corporation beside, well, I don't like the way they're doing their gardens. We're going to get a team together, go over there and redo their gardens and like make sure that they do everything the way we want. It's fucking weird when you think about it.
Yeah, but then it's like, also the boundaries of the condo corporation is also kind of weird, right? Like, that's an arbitrary, right? Like some of the nation statedness. Like, I think that the border is stupid. Because I just think it's stupid.
On a certain level.
But it appears that I'm in the minority, or at least, like,
it's true.
But there's a lot of, like, in order to accept that it's weird to go to the neighbor's condo corporation, you have to accept the idea of the condo corporations, right? And so like maybe that just cascades back pretty far to
Yeah, but like you wouldn't like you
assumptions.
and I wouldn't go to our neighbors and do that, but we are okay sometimes with our hive going and doing it to
I
other
disagree.
hives.
I might go and do my neighbor's garden.
Force them
Exactly. Yeah.
and then kill them with a drone if they don't.
Exactly. Like, I don't want to see any more whatever.
That seems unacceptable
Yeah,
at
it
the
does.
personal level, but at the collective level, we are okay with it.
Well,
more.
and that's, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
in-
weird.
I do think, and I don't know how to articulate it quite, but I think that there are errors and problems associated with anything at scale.
It's true.
Right? Like just bigness gets bad. And, you know, I don't know what's the somebody's number, which is the number of people you can know.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. The 150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of these
Dunbar number.
yes. But like descriptions of, you know, our ability to understand the world, like
Right.
it scales approximately to a tribe or something.
Right.
You know, we lived most of our evolution in
Yeah.
these small scale societies, and like now we're structured in these ginormous things, and there's going to be problems.
Yeah.
Right. And just nuances of how they're constructed.
Yeah, whatever that number is, there isn't one number. Obviously, it's a range of But I wonder if that range grows over time. You know, like it was 150 for a long time. Maybe it's now 3,000. I mean, is that possible? I don't know.
That you have the capacity to know. I mean, it's funny because like I know by name far more than 150 people. Do I know anything like any nuanced biographical details or know them in any meaningful way? I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder.
I feel like I know like 8 people like in
Right.
like deeply.
Sure. Top 10 humans.
Yeah. But like that's like what the range is weird. But I certainly, you know, don't have the capacity to be like to know in any meaningful way what it means to be a foreman in a small factory in Western Indiana, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're a professor and you have 1,000 students, I mean, well, the question is, do you need to, okay, you might not be able to know, you know, like you said, deep biographical information about all your friends or whatever, or people that you're connected to on social media, but the question is, do you need to know that to care for them? It seems to be the case that you need to know something about them and if you did know something more about a person, you care more about them. That's why, like, it's like you humanize the enemy, then you don't want to kill them anymore. But if they're an abstract number person, it's just a lot easier for people to take it out on other humans. But once you see something about them, oh, they have a 3-year-old daughter. Oh, all of a sudden it's creepy to think about them as an enemy or something. You know, there's often humanizing effects of knowing something about another person. So even though I think that Dunbar number could be 150, we know something about thousands of people. So that's got to be good.
Yeah, I mean, like we know basic,
expands.
like you eat, you sleep. Like we
That's
know,
true.
like there's about.
Yeah.
Again, they're like analogs to us. We can see it. Like you have 2 arms, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting like people knowing somebody's name, knowing something that's specific about the biography of an individual really does seem to influence our decision making. You know, I mean, you see that politically all the time. Like, what was his name? Joe the plumber. Remember Joe the plumber?
Yeah.
Right, and like he had a name, he had an occupation. The occupation was like emblematic of a certain kind of like masculine Midwestern workingness that people, a certain population
pull yourself
could
up by your
identify.
bootstraps kind of guy.
Like there's a bunch of stuff that people could identify with and project onto, and you wonder. I mean, that instinct is also weaponized against us, though, and
that's true.
I think it's a
good point.
Is a particular case of it being weaponized against us.
That's true.
I mean, by whom and why?
Well, there's always someone that wants to manipulate your behavior to their ends, and this is, I mean, all of this social media and internet connectivity that we have. A lot of it is fueled simply by someone monetizing your attention
Yes.
in order for them to get you to do something, which is
Yes.
usually to buy something.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Or
vote for someone
vote.
or yeah.
I mean, it's funny though, because I like, there's a narrative, and I think that we've kind of gotten past it, but there was a big narrative last year that like, oh, look, Cambridge Analytica made Trump president. And you're like, not really. Like, people still voted, right? It was, like, individuals still went and voted for stuff, and like, he didn't win the popular vote, but he won the electoral. Like, but
they were
in
one of
legal
the
terms,
factors
like,
that shaped it.
Sure, maybe, but I don't even know what that in a meaningful way
Who knows?
says. You know, it's also important that we don't have a baseline to know how much people used to be voting on really crass misinformation, right? Like, now
That's
we
probably
can
always the case.
yeah, like now we can measure it,
Right.
But like, I don't know, like did somebody vote for Woodrow Wilson? Because I don't even know who Woodrow Wilson ran against, but like they had heard that person was the Antichrist or something. Like,
right. Or often they're just like group of people or their church or you know, the city mobster gave them each $1 to vote or whatever. I mean, there
were a lot of other
like
error
that.
modes,
Yeah.
like and social stuff has not always been like clean and prim and proper, and
right.
But it does seem important to me that the like town square, like it's a
the
agora. It's like, it's a stupid analogy, but like, but it's kind of important that like the place that we're supposed to get together to talk, being these social media platforms,
Right.
are privatized.
That's a shame.
And have private commercial
inevitable,
interests.
maybe.
I don't.
Well, up to this point,
Man, like, I would not be surprised to see some states starting to say, unfortunately, this is not. These are candidates for nationalization.
Interesting.
I don't. I mean,
well, China certainly would, but I mean, could you see something like that happening in Canada? I don't know. That's interesting.
I mean, we've had like the previous couple of generations of major technological tech companies were nationalized, right? So like Bell Canada was nationalized, Air
Nortel
Canada was
started that way.
nationalized. Well, because it was a descendant of Bell, right? It was an extract from Bell, or what?
Something like that.
But like we've had the big, large scale tech companies in previous generations nationalized, and you know, they importantly were nationalized for similar reasons, that they had strong network effects, that they had the properties of a utility, which is also like a heavily, which in various jurisdictions are explicitly nationalized or regulated as quasi-national entities.
Certain things become at some point obvious, medicine, for example, or even insurance, you might say, should be much more efficiently.
Well, I mean, insurance is nationalized. Auto insurance is in
some
British
provinces.
Columbia, and I mean, it would not surprise me if we came to the point where you're like, okay, the way that you get a job, the way that you do all of these things is mediated through these particular entities, that is too deep a level, like it's too much control.
Scares me too, though.
Does it? Why?
Even putting it in the hands of government is kind of scary to me.
Yeah,
I don't know what's worse.
I mean, because part of the reason I like email is because it's the transaction mechanism is like does go through like the transactions go out into the wild, but like I have control over a set of, or at least my local set of features, like they're in my domain. Yeah. Whereas and even in like the postal service, like I own or I don't own my mailbox. I don't know who owns my mailbox.
I think Canada Post. Well, U.S. Post owns theirs.
I know, but whatever. But the control over that access point is mine in a meaningful way, and then they just execute the transactions, and the execution of the transactions is supposed to be auditable or whatever. But as it stands now, the place that Facebook in particular, but I presume all of the social media organizations, like it's the transaction is what they claim to have sovereignty over. And you're like, well, but that's I don't want you.
Yeah. Well, this gets.
I want there to be an auditability to the transaction, and right now there's not.
Well, this reminds me of blockchain, and I mean, people are talking about this as a way to have a system of trust, but not necessarily in the hands of government or business. And you know, it's kind of a utopian ideal in a way if you can manage to make that work. I don't know if you've been looking into that stuff, but there's a lot of
not so much.
I'm hoping to get maybe some expert on that and you talk about it. I want to learn more about it.
Well, you should talk to Milan.
Oh, yeah?
Matthew Milan.
Oh, right.
He's pretty into it. I mean, I'm skeptical, but like not for terribly knowledgeable reasons.
Right. Well, there's a lot of layers to that.
Like one thing that seems intuitive to me, but maybe it's crazy, is that accountability is important, right? Like, and so, you know, in the case of the union fighting against the corporation as embodied in its management or its like largest shareholder, the union had something to fight against. There was something that embodied it and that was accountable. And you could be like, I'm going to murder you in your bed unless you give me a weekend. But if the corporation is just this amorphous thing with no...
Who do you direct that?
Yeah, exactly. Like it becomes, like it sort of becomes a nightmare of a hydra, right? You're like one of the appealing things about using my Visa card is exactly that it is centralized, and that if something goes wrong, there's somebody to appeal to, and maybe what will happen with blockchain is we'll set up new appeal mechanisms. And
well, I'm not just talking about money though. Like one of the uses for blockchain is cryptocurrencies, but the other is it could be. I mean, I was just thinking we could use it to write a new constitution, for example, and we could continue to modify the constitution on the fly, or change laws based on whatever. You know, these are the kind of things that could be possible if you had a lot of people engaged in a system. Like rather than having a Congress or a parliament, you could have this decentralized system that everyone is kind of taking part in, and the best of these developments are getting encoded into the system, and everyone's seeing how it's done and who wrote it in, and you know, all the transactions are there and not hidden. That sort of thing is kind of interesting. I don't know how it would work. I don't even know if that even makes sense what I just said, but these are the kind of things that might be possible with kind of this distributed network way of doing stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I mean, you hear about people talk blockchain-y, AI stuff replacing the legal profession.
Yeah, I don't know.
And how many?
Not sure I totally understand it all yet.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I totally do either. But and I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff that is encodable, right? But I also think that a lot of what we're talking about with politics and law is decisions and assignments about power. And I don't know how you automate that, right? Like that.
Not everything can be encoded maybe that easily.
Yeah, because like what is the recourse when somebody goes outside the system? What does it mean to go outside the system?
Right.
You know, like compliance and adherence to our laws is just so consensus driven. And it requires that people volunteer to adhere to it. And I don't know what that means in a...
Yeah, but whatever it means is kind of exciting.
Yeah. It's interesting and strange, but again, like you look at Donald Trump and like apparently a lot of the thing, it's his ignoring of the unspoken norms that's sort of most surprising. And people would say like, oh no, but we have laws for this stuff. You're like, no,
checks and balances.
They're norms. And like, and the degree to which we're governed by norms or as opposed to things that are encoded is not clear to me.
Yeah. And a lot of these norms are, again, kind of based on our primitive body systems. I mean, like a lot of people react quite well to somebody who's very confident and seems to know what they're doing and just spews out and that just overrides all kinds of cognitive information that's being transmitted.
Yeah.
And those are part of the norms. And someone like Trump is gonna work on a lot of people. And information systems don't necessarily tap into that.
It's funny because I feel like as soon as I feel like I'm being sold to,
Yeah.
I feel like as soon as I feel, but
You have a bullshit detector, maybe. That's
yeah, but it's like
more
I'm like a
refined.
really skeptical
Yeah,
bullshit,
me
and
too.
so like and that's probably to a fault, right? I
Could
just
be,
think
yeah.
everything's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, whatever
you might isolate yourself if you're so extreme and maybe not
Yeah.
even connect to people as a result.
Yeah,
That's-
you're like
that's
everything
also
is bullshit,
possible.
but but some of these people just like I don't like being sold to,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I feels like other people like being sold to
They
more, but
do.
maybe it's just but then maybe also we're just blind to the things that
well,
the sales pitches that work on us.
that's true.
You know, like,
when I had opened up a computer store
Yeah.
back in my 20s, I'd never really sold anything, but I remember going on the shop floor and
Yeah.
selling computer parts, and I realized that I didn't like being sold to.
yeah,
So as a result, I didn't sell.
yeah,
I just tried to educate or
Yeah.
inform.
which becomes a sales technique.
Exactly. It eventually became a very effective sales technique.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I was like, boom, boom, boom. I'm just selling a whole bunch of stuff
Yeah,
because, that is a sales technique, right? So
yeah, and like that, like I mean, and that's it. It's like the boundary.
maybe it's more
between-
sophisticated, right?
or I don't know, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's more sophisticated. I definitely, when somebody seems in an outsized way to be
Yeah.
like, I've had the experience several times.
Mm.
There are a bunch of cars I haven't purchased
Mm-hmm.
because I was unsold on them.
Right.
And I'm like, that was just weird. Like I
Yeah.
told you,
But I bet you it works on 80% of the people.
Yeah, and
that's the
that's-
thing. You're probably an outlier.
yeah. Or this is a really tricky thing. In the law. So my wife is at a law firm, and there have been a variety of people in various ways that have crossed her path that she's been like, that guy is kind of a jerk. And you're like, that's a classic image of, the hard-nosed
Yeah.
litigator, lawyer, person of, and it might be the case that they have just been sufficiently successful that they believe that behavior, like they've just been successful enough that behavior gets reinforced.
Sure, yeah.
But it's not necessarily true that it was the optimal behavior for them to
I
engage
think
in,
you're
right?
right.
And
Yeah.
so I do think that with a lot of these, like I remember going and test driving a car. I really liked it. I was going to buy it. And then the salesman was like, what did it take to get you to walk out of here
yeah.
today? And I'll be like, I'm not going to buy a car from you right now. Like, I've got to go.
Yeah.
I've test drove it. I'm going to come back next week. I'm going to buy it from you. Chill out. And he did it again and again. And then I didn't buy the car from him.
Oh man, often I would just do that just as a joke when I
What's
was
that?
selling. It's like,
Oh,
when I was
really?
selling, it's like, what would it take to get you? That would be, but that would work.
Yeah, and see, and so like sometimes
It's
it
got a
works,
meta humor.
and,
Yeah.
and it that gets confusing, and but so it might be the case that there's like enough of the population it works on, but maybe there would be a better
Yeah, it's
path.
effective enough. It's
Yeah,
not optimal.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then maybe it's also the case that there is no optimal. I don't know.
Yeah, well, probably not.
And like, and
Yeah,
maybe I am the worst person to sell to because I just think everybody's like I
true.
don't want to commit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like-
There's an art, I guess, to, well, again, it's like someone's trying to convince you to behave in a certain way. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, if you're really cynical about it, you could say all communication is kind of like that because everyone wants their world to be optimized for themselves. So, like they're communicating in a way with you to convince you to be optimal for them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if it is, it's kind of unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to your question about like how do you set things up? How do you set up the systems in the
Right.
world so that people can make decisions even if we're ignorant of? Because that's probably the case. We're all ignorant about things.
Sure.
But finding ways to trust across our ignorances is interesting, and and not assume that the counterparty is just acting in a purely self-interested or aligning incentives. Like, how do you align incentives across various domains? And maybe that I don't know how it works, but maybe that's a case for blockchainness.
Right.
That like surfacing, like,
Right.
'cause, like the other thing about blockchain is they're visible.
Yes,
And so like
yes,
transparent.
transparency, yeah.
And so you're like, so surfacing people's interests, maybe you find some way to align incentives, or people can at least be more aware of other people's incentives. And
It's a good direction to move towards.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally live my life that way. I mean, I think transparency seems to have served me well, and I'm doing more and more of it. So I get to the extent now that where pretty much everything's out in the open. I mean, and then with this podcast too, I'm talking about my deepest fears and desires and problems and drug addiction, even things like that, which would be kind of weird to do even a few years ago. It's kind of like that tall poppy thing, right? You know, we were talking about it you don't want to be noticed by an alien because they might come and kill you. But on the other hand, you might be noticed by an alien who's going to come and help you. So it's the same problem on the personal level. Like, do I reveal everything about myself and leave myself vulnerable? And another way to think about it is you reveal everything about yourself, you open up yourself to a lot more capacity to connect with people.
I mean, when we were talking about the rise of various authoritarian regimes and the constraints that authoritarianism has on people's ability to communicate.
Yeah.
And it's like, it seems like a weird aside, but you see people very often tailoring their public personas like against how they think they want to be perceived, so that they can get a job or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, it turns out that just makes you seem fucking anodyne and boring.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that one of the risks associated with some of these like authoritarian regimes is just like everybody gets way more boring.
Yeah. Oh,
right.
yeah.
Because you're like,
Well,
it turns out that the thing that I want to know about people is like not how you're broken, but kinda, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what's interesting, what's different.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of us and we mostly do the same stuff. The thing that's interesting is like the boundary layer and the degree to which we don't talk about it
right.
seems super boring.
Yeah. But there's something very valuable about having honest agents. Like, you want to know that someone is not holding something back, because who knows what that is. It's better to put it out in the open than
but I also think like when was the last time you had a job interview?
I don't think I ever have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I've had a handful, but not that many.
But
you've
I've interviewed people. Yeah.
And I remember going into my first, I'm going to say it was my first job interview. And initially with a sense that like that person was judging, or like that the game was that I wanted to get something that they had,
Right.
which kind of is true. But the other side of the game is also true, right? That like the reason you're hiring somebody is because they have something like ability, labor that you want.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it is an exchange of value, and in both directions, you want to make sure that it's an exchange you want to make.
Right.
And so like a job interview is about finding fit and about, like the interviewee also needs to ask some pretty incisive, tough questions and it turns out that being transparent there probably leads to like it might not lead to you always getting the job offer, but it probably leads to you accepting a job that you're more likely to thrive in or like, right? Because you ask the hard questions at the beginning. But I think that most people are trained to have these job interviews where they like wear a nice, neat black suit and just seem super boring. And you're like, well, but turns out that the office might be really interesting in a way that's not your cup of tea.
That's right.
Right. And like, maybe you should have be more interesting up front.
Sure. Have you ever gone to a speed dating event when you were single? Because it's kind of like a job interview, but you could do it. What I sense is that most people are doing it the wrong way, which is they're kind of like a job interview. It's like they're trying to get in there and quickly within 5 minutes tell everything about themselves. Oh, this is what I did. This is my education. I think that's a mistake. You know, like you just go in there and just talk about whatever, anything, and you're going to reveal more about yourself, and you're going to be more interesting, and you're going to find a better fit that way. It's kind of the same approach.
I mean, what is the creative writing rule? Like,
do you mean?
like kind of like write what you know, but
Oh,
like
right,
writing
yeah.
the specific, like the specific speaks to the global.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and it's very easy, I think, in a job interview setting to be like, well, yes, I earn lots of money and I like a house and I would like a family. Right. And you're like, but that doesn't, that doesn't actually paint a picture. Like
No.
you need specificity. And then the rest of it can kind of be implied.
Yeah. And you might get that specificity just by talking about something totally unrelated.
Exactly. Right. And you like get the sense that the person is reliable and compassionate or funny or what, like, but yeah, I think it's really easy to make boring assumptions about what other people are going to be interested in. And that's sort of it, right? You're
that's
like,
true. Yeah.
Like, what is it that the counterparty in this situation is going to find important? You're like, oh.
Well, that could be useful in very narrow ranges of behaviors. Like if you're in a contract negotiation for like cents per hour or whatever like that, you could maybe narrow it down to certain tactical game theory type things. But in life, that's not as useful as people think.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, I mean, but even like most contract negotiations, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
You could game theory your way through it, or you can just come to like a really good, mutually acceptable.
Yeah. And usually honesty goes a long way. Like, what do I really want? What do you really want? How can we both get what we want? That's a way better way to negotiate than like, I'm going to get as much as I can out of him. And, this is what I
the
find.
multiple iterations games as well, right? Like there's that you can enter into a job interview with the intent to win. Right. But you're like, but turns out that you're going to be playing games. Like what you're doing is you're playing a preliminary game with somebody to figure out whether or not you're going to like playing games together.
Right.
And
true.
like, so that's a different game, right?
Yeah,
like,
true.
and you're going to be iterating on it a lot, and being a bad actor just doesn't help anyone.
Yeah. Especially if you're auditioning for acting.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side to that, and it just occurs to me now, because I'm not super self-aware, but it's a very privileged position to take, actually, right? That going into a job interview is something that you are free in other dimensions in your life to be unsuccessful in. So, having like my point of view, like. I'm going in, I'm also interviewing the employer. And, right. Like implies that I don't really need the job.
Right. In fact, that'll work to your advantage.
Sure. No, totally. But it implies like, but if it's the only job that's available, if there's a labor and capital mismatch that's in capital's favor, if if you're poor, you're hungry,
or you're an American, you need health insurance, or you're
exactly
die.
Right. Like sometimes the cards are stacked against you, and what you actually need is the job.
Right.
And so my theory of a job interview implies a more balanced power dynamic, which implies privilege on the part of the interviewee.
True. That's true, and it's not always the case.
It's not, and maybe it turns out that like
maybe it's
a
rare.
relatively affluent white male in educated white male in Canada is a very special case of people who are going to be having job interviews.
That's true.
And so maybe job interviewers should stop being such jerks. Like, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, you hear about people interviewing for jobs. And a friend of mine was interviewing for an assistant. Right. And so like the HR department is like, okay, here's the pool of people. We've done a thing. We're going to send you somebody to be your new assistant. And so she interviewed somebody and was like, love her, hired. And the HR department, like she got in a fight, kind of, not a fight, but like a back and forth with the HR department about, they were like, you just interviewed one person. She was like,
It fit.
It was great.
Yeah.
Like, it's great. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's this idea that if you're looking for perfection rather than something that's just good.
Yeah.
And like what the dimensions of the conversation are kind of.
Yeah. And especially for a position like an assistant, it's going to be more important for maybe the fundamental fits are more important, like how you get along, how you talk, how you maybe just feel comfortable around a person. That's going to be just as important as any skill sets that they have, if you think that they can learn.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's still some things like do you show up on time? Do you bathe? Like, can you write clearly? Can you there's a bunch of.
That's right.
Depending on what the assistant role is, there's going to be a bunch of like pretty serious things that you want them to be able to do. But to your point, like. Presumably those things, and presumably those things are going to be filtered by the HR department.
That's true.
Right? Like, so you're relying on them to do some of their job.
Yeah.
But there's this idea that I interview a lot of people and find the perfect one and find the best one. And you're like, but
how would you
why?
know? Yeah.
What does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, you found somebody who seems good, who seems really nice. They told some funny jokes.
Yeah.
Done. Move on.
Recently I've been thinking about maybe hiring an assistant. I had, you met Claire. She was helping. She's now started her own businesses, and she's quite busy doing other things. So I'm having to do some of this stuff on my own. But, I got a lot of ideas. Like I said, I get into these manic states where I have art project ideas. I have like an idea for an app. I got maybe organizing my life and, figuring out my music software so that I can be set up so that I can play and all that stuff. So maybe I'd like to hire somebody to just do all that stuff for me. And I wouldn't know where to begin to look for a person that's so widely skilled that they almost got to be like me. But I guess maybe a younger version of me.
I mean, so I had an assistant for a bunch of years who is now my brother-in-law.
Oh, wow.
So he was at the time my girlfriend's kid brother. And he was graduating from Dalhousie with a degree in economics and philosophy of science.
Oh, wow.
Not particularly like good degree, but not particularly targeted to being an assistant for a photographer.
Right.
But he was like interested in the arts and thought he might like to be a photographer. And so he's like, can I work for you? And I was really skeptical for a bit, but then had him come out on a couple of projects, and then it turned out that he was just really observant and smart, and identified very quickly the things that were going to make our projects run smoothly. And then he became my full-time assistant and was my assistant for years. And it was awesome. And it was.
It feels like that would be such a wonderful thing to get right. Like if you could get someone that
he was amazing, except then he was like, after whatever, like 3 years, I don't know how long he worked for me. At any rate, he was like, I don't want to be a photographer. It seems too hard. And then went and did his own thing. At which point I was like, where did I leave my notebook? I was like, oh yeah, he picked up my notebook when I he did these things that just made everything smooth. Like we would go to a meeting and he'd take good notes.
Yeah.
Like we do stuff. Awesome. And then you realize you're like, oh, that really made life easier in a lot of dimensions.
Because ideally you'd want everything taken care of for you except where you're most valuable, which, like your creativity or bring what you can, just like show up and talk and create or something like that.
And
that would be ideal.
And the role of being an assistant for a photographer doing what I was doing was like pretty various. So like his job would be he would travel with me a lot. He would go to meetings with various people a lot. He was responsible for like managing my studio mostly, dealing with gear, running this, like when we were shooting, he would run sets. Like it's a bunch of different stuff. Cause it's like being a photographer is kind of a crappy small business. So like you just sort of do everything, right? But so I feel like that in that case, what you would want is somebody who is smart.
Yes.
Like that's somebody who's really notices stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But also has the patience. Patience is one thing I'm lacking. Like, for example, this Ableton software is not that difficult to figure out, really, but I don't have the patience to get into all the nitty gritty of everything.
I don't give a shit about that dumb button. I don't want to know.
But it would be great if someone figured that all out, got it set up for me, and I could just play it. So you need somebody who's kind of like technically proficient as well, and maybe can generate like a prototype for an app or something like that. We could work out some ideas. And
see, I mean, a bunch of these things, I just think they're not rocket science.
No. It's patience required.
Yeah, it's patience. It's
Yeah.
like personality traits.
Yeah.
And like a willingness to deal with like ambiguity and
Because I mean, we could write apps, we could do blockchain. I mean, we learn all these things, but
who wants to? Come on,
that's too much.
I mean, it's funny because I get asked a lot by a lot of people about cameras, and the entire time I've been a photographer, I've had virtually no idea because I'm like, I don't.
Interesting.
Some other people bring them, and I use them, but I don't know the details because I don't really care.
You're more interested in the
and like there's some dimensions of like I would have some technical abilities and some things that I would be aware of, but like makes and models and the details of a bunch of things I just wouldn't care unless they were important. But there's a bunch of stuff to spend time looking at, and there's only so much time I'm going to spend understanding, I don't know, the menu structure of this new camera. Like, I don't care. Like, just something I'm not going to do.
I'm sure the top 10 are good enough. You know,
yeah, exactly. And I'm just going to use the best one.
Yeah.
What you tell me what's the best one.
Right.
Done.
That's how I feel. Yeah. That's great. We have,
and like sometimes you have to audit that and test whatever, but how and when you delegate and offload some of that stuff is
got to figure that shit out. Get more out of ourselves.
I mean, yes, but then at the same time, you how am I going to say this? Having expertise in the details sometimes probably influences the.
That's a good point.
Right, like
it'll bring out more and different, interesting, creative things as well if you have the details.
Like it might be the case that you not knowing the like really weird, deep nitty gritty of Ableton means that you're leaving something on the table.
Doubt. Oh, I'm leaving 99% of that stuff out. Even the 1% I've discovered is blowing my mind.
Totally.
But,
and then that's the thing is that, like constraints are good.
Yeah, that's true.
And so maybe your constraint is you're like, I don't care about the, like, I'm the songwriter, the producer can be the producer. Right. I'm going to hit the drums. Yeah. Somebody else can like spend hours in Logic or whatever it is, like Pro Tools shaping whatever the final waveform of that drum sound. But like
the detailed stuff that we lack the patience for. I'm going to talk to you after about maybe setting up hiring an assistant. I've never really like put up a job ad or something for that.
That's interesting.
But and what to pay them, if you had like closer to a full time, that sort of thing. And maybe this will be I'm looking for someone. If you're listening.
Do your job interview right now. Right. Not your job interview, your job ad rather. Excuse me. Do your job ad
that'll be in the monologue maybe.
Well,
before.
I mean, because you're looking for a very particular kind of
well, I guess the person I'm looking for is gonna be very helpful to me, but they're gonna learn a lot too, right? I mean, that's usually what the promise is when they give free internships. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about paying them a good, but they're gonna learn a lot.
Well, and I mean so this is a funny thing in photography, which is like commercial photography, which is sort of matured from being like these small studios that would have a small staff and whatever, to being kind of like closer to small scale television commercial production. The promise for assistants was always like, you get paid badly, but you work for a few years and then you can transition into the photographer role. Yeah. But what lacked for a long time was like, turned out that we needed like professional assistants, like people who were going to work as crew, and it's kind of a dumb, like they literally get called assistants. Like that's the only job title. But you're like, some people I need to know lighting, some people I need to know cameras, some people, and so like kind of specializing and fragmenting that thing. But there was some, and there kind of continues to be some difficulty figuring out how these people get paid, because the promise stops being like, you're going to get paid badly, but with this implicit education. Like
Yes.
you're learning stuff,
Yes.
and then in
but you don't
4
want
years,
that to be the only thing they're getting out of it.
No, exactly. They need to get paid.
Yes.
But then you fast forward and you're like, no. But now I just want that person to be like a professional photo lighting person. So that person has to get paid like 4 times more.
Right.
And it turns out that they're way more expensive, but now they exist and it's awesome. But like the model of like I as soon as education is like implicit, there's like that's a trade-off, and like in a way you're accepting a lower
That's true. You got
comp
a point.
to get taught stuff.
Well, the irony is that if somebody knew all that stuff, they probably wouldn't work for you as an assistant. So there has to be some education.
Yeah, it's true.
Otherwise, they'd be doing what you're doing, right?
Yes.
And they'd be hiring an assistant. So that's why I guess there has to be kind of an age difference as well, like a younger person who's just coming into the world of this kind of thing.
So that was funny when I started as a photographer. How old was I? 27. And like I did it for basically a year as an assistant, and then I started shooting, and I was younger than most of my assistants, and like most of the people who'd work on set, because they had they'd just been around longer, and I just started shooting, and it was kind of weirdly awkward for a while, like.
Yeah,
because I'd be like, I am the least experienced and youngest person on set. But I'm like notionally the boss, but like that's kind of dumb.
It's a strange dynamic.
It's a weird dynamic, and like,
but we tend to get over that after a little while. Yeah,
I think that's the case. I'm gonna have to get.
I think
moving.
we're sweating, and it's
great chat.
It's almost 3 hours. Holy cow!
So the real job interview for whoever is listening is: Did you get through all 3 hours to hear the job posting?
It's going to be a limited set of people.
You're hired.
Let's do a high five, man.
High five. That's great.
Thanks a lot, Angus. All right. Take care.